Hello, everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as YUJI Itadori, Part 4. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
On top of a building in the evacuated city of Shibuya, Kenjaku watched countless curses wandering around, a small, content smile never leaving his lips. Was this due to the chaos in front of him? Or the fact that the curses now had the upper hand? Neither. It was simply because his plan, which he had devised hundreds of years ago, was finally coming to fruition. He had tried several times before, but thanks to the previous Six Eyes users, he always ended up being defeated. But now, with Satoru Gojo's sealing, he could say there wasn't much the sorcerers could do. Sure, there were some unforeseen variables, but Kenjaku had prepared too well for that to be a problem. In the end, it would be him who would see the result of his ambition. "What are you doing?" But as he seemed to enjoy the view, his attention was diverted when a voice came from behind him. He turned to see an irritated Urama. "What is it, Urama?" Crossing his arms, he asked quite calmly. "Stop wasting time, we must prepare for Master Sukuna's return." Approaching, she spoke seriously, which elicited a sigh from Geto. "We are still on schedule, there's no need to rush." The woman remained silent, listening to him, her brow furrowing as if she were thinking about something. Kenjaku noticed this and couldn't help but wonder what had troubled her so much. He understood she had some kind of insane loyalty to Sukuna, but he wouldn't accelerate his plans because of that. "Tell me something." But as he heard her, he raised an eyebrow, curious about what she might want to know. "My master's vessel. What is different about him?" Kenjaku blinked at the question, clearly surprised that Urama had shown interest in someone other than Sukuna. This brought a smile to his face. "So you noticed?" Sitting on the edge of the building, he crossed his legs while rubbing his chin. Seeing this, Urama's irritation returned. "As you told me, he has only been a sorcerer for 3 months. It's not normal for him to have reached that level. Just answer me. No need to get upset." With his smile still in place, he let himself fall back, lying comfortably on the edge. To be honest, Itadori Yuji is a complete surprise. From what I've noticed, he somehow developed an innate technique. Raising his hand, he began to draw some imaginary figures with his finger. His technique seems quite similar to Yuta Okatsu's copying ability, but I can say there's a big difference between the two. Imagine Itadori Yuji's technique as a tree without branches, and each copied technique is like a branch sprouting from its trunk. Urama narrowed her eyes at this. "What makes you think that?" There is a limit to the number of techniques the brain can handle, and even Yuta Okatsu suffers from it. Itadori has shown immunity to this disadvantage, as he has his own technique, Sukuna's technique, and Jogo's technique. Moreover, I believe he was trying to acquire Mahito's technique. Urama's eyes widened, clearly surprised by this information. "So, does that mean that instead of copying, the stolen techniques become part of the main technique?" "Exactly." With a smile, Kenjaku nodded. Urama pressed her lips together, her mind returning to the moment she was brutally hit by the boy's black flash. With such growth in 3 months and an innate technique like that, wouldn't his latent potential be comparable to Master Sukuna's? Even more so if we consider that he is already capable of using his technique? Kenjaku raised his hands in surrender. "That's what you're saying, not me." She frowned. "Besides, it doesn't matter. Our schedule won't allow him to progress so far as to become a problem. Talented or not, there will be very little time for a significant change." Urama seemed uncertain about this. Landing firmly on the ground, Itadori sped through the city streets like a bullet, his eyes focused on a target moving like a blur. Seeing his target crash clumsily into a wall as it tried to change direction, Itadori exploded with the strength of his legs, reaching it in an instant. Boom! Striking it with a precise punch that split the creature's stomach, he quickly jumped to avoid the saliva that flew from the curse's mouth. Never thought a curse resembling a Komodo dragon would be so fast. Shaking his hand to rid himself of the blood, he turned to notice Choso running towards him. Sorry, brother. I couldn't keep up. Itadori shrugged, clearly unbothered by Choso's inability to follow him. Don't worry about it, the important thing is we took it down. Pointing his palm at the curse's body, Itadori incinerated it in seconds, then turned to Choso. Seeing this, Choso couldn't help but feel disturbed. Since the battle in Shibuya, his brother had been very indifferent. Of course, he couldn't say he knew him before to determine if this was unusual, but talking to his comrades, he knew Itadori should be more lively than this. Had the death of countless civilians affected him so much? Choso couldn't say for sure. But regardless, he couldn't bear to see his brother pushing himself so hard to keep going. Over the past 3 days, Choso made it clear that it wouldn't hurt if they took a break. As an older brother, he feared not only for his brother's physical integrity but also for his mental well-being. And being away from his comrades after such a catastrophic event like the Shibuya incidents, that certainly shouldn't be healthy. It was a bit hypocritical of him to think this way, given that he was one of the perpetrators of the Shibuya massacre. But that mattered little to Choso, since discovering his younger brother, he had become a completely different man. Even if he didn't regret what he had done, after all, it was thanks to that he could meet his younger brother. Alright, I think it's time to talk to them again. Hearing this, Choso blinked in surprise, turning to see Itadori with his arms crossed. What? Is that serious, Yuji? He asked in surprise, causing Itadori to look at him strangely. What is it? I wasn't avoiding them, I was just delaying what's coming. Choso nodded, a small smile appearing on his lips. I see. So, shall we go? Maybe he was worrying for nothing. But pausing for a moment, he turned to his younger brother with confusion. What do you mean by that? In silence, Itadori showed no reaction to the question, just shrugged and started walking. Don't worry about it. Walking right behind his brother, Choso couldn't help but look at his back. Itadori had grown more since Shibuya. In a short period of time, he had not only further refined his physical enhancement but also learned the basics of his new techniques. He could switch between his copied techniques with ease, and even combine some of them, despite Yuji himself saying that it was difficult and impractical in battle, at least for now. In such a short time, and with such great growth, Choso could say that his younger brother had an abnormal talent, greater than anyone the death painting had ever known. With everything in question, and with his indifference to destroying curses, Choso could say, Itadori Yuji was a true demon god. It wouldn't be an exaggeration for Choso to think that in a few years, his name would be feared among curses. But still, Choso couldn't help his concern. The fact that the boy had not yet recovered and was capable of doing all this was surprising, but certainly not healthy. Having taken a significant amount of damage from his consecutive fights, the reverse cursed energy couldn't fully heal him, leaving the rest to the boy's own body. Fortunately, his brother could finally relax for a moment, as they were heading toward where their allies were. Where exactly are they? Passing through the entrance gate of Jujutsu High, Choso looked around with interest. They're hidden in a secret room by the teacher. Something like not wanting to worry the higher-ups. Moving with carefree steps, Itadori hid his hands in the pockets of his jacket, his eyes landing on a small building away from the entrance. At this point, they must already be about to revoke the order for my execution. Choso frowned, clearly irritated by the idea of his brother being executed. It doesn't make any sense. Choso spoke irritably, to which Itadori nodded in agreement. Yes, but there's no need to worry. And responding indifferently, he gave the man a look. It won't last long. Choso widened his eyes, understanding the implication of those words. Yuji, you're not thinking of. We're here. But cutting him off, Itadori declared as they stopped in front of a small wooden house, not wasting time following him inside. This made Choso narrow his eyes suspiciously, but he decided to let it go for now. Strange. What makes this place special? Choso asked, noting the simple interior, except for a small metal door on the floor leading to an underground shelter. Enchantments? I really wouldn't know, I just know it's undetectable. Stopping in front of the hatch, Itadori transferred cursed energy to the door, pulling it open all at once. This is cool. I'll definitely ask the teacher how he did this when we free him. Choso nodded, a slight feeling of irritation coming to mind for some reason. Descending the shelter's stairs, Itadori soon found himself in a small room, where the only interesting things were a sofa and a television mounted on the wall. You decided to show up. And hearing a female voice beside him, he turned to see Yuki Tsukumo sitting in a chair, a cup of coffee in hand. You worried your companions, Todo has been depressed since then. Itadori smiled at this and, moving to the sofa, he sat down. Sorry about that, I needed some time to think. Choso, following his brother, turned to Yuki for a moment, noticing the woman winking at him. Confused, he sat down next to Itadori. How has the Jujutsu world been? Itadori asked, his gaze turning to Yuki. The higher-ups have been making some interesting moves. She put her cup down on a small table. Gojo was officially considered an accomplice and exiled, trying to remove his seal is being considered a criminal act. Yaga received the death penalty and is currently in hiding. And the suspension of your death sentence has been revoked, but they haven't chosen an executioner yet. Itadori nodded at the information. Everything was happening according to his expectations, so he didn't react much to having his sentence reinstated. I understand. And what's your plan? He asked with interest. For now, we're giving everyone time to recover from their injuries, then we'll all contact Tengen. Itadori remained silent, his mind organizing all the information he knew. Kenjaku wanted to assimilate all humans with Tengen, and for that, he needed the main body. Itadori had plans to stop him while avoiding Yuki's death. Maybe they couldn't kill him, but at least they could prevent him from acquiring Tengen's body. This would buy them more time in the culling game. But before that, he had some matters to settle with the Jujutsu higher-ups. He didn't need an investigation to know that the higher-ups were full of corruption. In his eyes, the members of the higher-ups were just taking up space in this world. Their presence didn't help at all, only serving to complicate the lives of sorcerers who genuinely wanted to make a difference. Besides, Itadori didn't want to have to face Yuta. If that happened, he would have to surrender his life to the young sorcerer, as there was a binding vow between Yuta and the higher-ups. And even knowing that Sukuna would revive him, as he had been consuming the fingers that were in Jogo's possession since Shibuya, he still preferred not to take any risks. With his gaze turning to his hand, he looked at his fingers indifferently. Since Shibuya, he had consumed 3 fingers, totaling 8 fingers. With each one consumed, he felt Sukuna struggle for dominance, so he decided not to risk consuming more than 1 finger at a time. He let his body get used to the finger's energy, which took about a day. It seemed that since Sukuna didn't have a binding vow allowing him to take over the body whenever he wanted, he seemed more determined to take control through brute force. But Itadori didn't see that happening, he was confident in his ability to resist. And what do you plan to do? Yuki asked suddenly, snapping Itadori out of his reverie. I have some matters to attend to, but I'll be back soon. And getting up with a sigh, he stretched his arms. Choso, I'd like you to stay here until I return. What? Of course not. But immediately opposing the idea, he stood up to face his younger brother. I thought we were coming here to rest. Itadori smiled, appreciating the death painting's concern. I had to confirm a few things, but I'll be back soon. It's nothing dangerous. Choso snorted, crossing his arms as he stared at the boy. That's a lie. And he declared bluntly. Itadori blinked, surprised that Choso had seen through him. What makes you think? I've been watching you the whole time, you seem bothered. Does this have to do with the higher-ups? Itadori remained silent, his smile never leaving his lips as he placed a hand on Choso's shoulder. Don't worry, what I'm going to do will be quick. And without further ado, he passed by the man, causing Choso to immediately turn with the intention of following him. Let him go, Yuki said, causing Choso to freeze, turning to face the woman with irritation. Don't you trust your brother? He can handle it on his own. The word stopped on the tip of his tongue, Choso frowning. No, it's not that. And watching his brother climb the stairs, he stared at his back with indecision, his lips tightening. Alright, I trust you, Yuji. And sighing in defeat, he watched the boy turn to him with a thumbs up before disappearing. And with complete silence taking over the room, he turned to see Yuki watching him with a small smile. Leaving the small building, Itadori observed how the sun seemed to be setting. Footsteps. But noticing someone approaching, his attention shifted as he turned. You look well. And widening his eyes upon hearing the voice, Itadori watched in surprise. What's wrong? You don't remember me just because I look like this? Maki? But ignoring the girl's question, he stepped forward, noting how her body was almost completely bandaged under her clothes. Can you already move freely? Not as much as I'd like, but yes. Itadori smiled genuinely. That's good. Maki had become a great friend to Yuji. In fact, all his companions over the past few months had become important people to him. That's why he felt guilty for all of them. Fortunately, he no longer had to be bound by the reins of fate. Before, he lacked the confidence to make a significant change, but now, he could say he had enough power for that. Knowing what was coming, he would change not only his own destiny but also that of his companions. And he would start with Maki. How has your recovery been? Walking across the campus alongside the girl, he asked. Pretty boring. Not being able to train is like torture. She said with a click of her tongue, her irritation clear in her tone. That brought a smile to Itadori's face. Having trained with her, he wasn't surprised to see her feeling this way. I imagined. And you? I heard your sentence was revoked. How do you feel about that? Itadori stopped when that question came out of the girl's mouth, his eyes showing a surprise that Maki couldn't help but notice. He was surprised. This was actually the most intimate and deep question Maki had ever asked him. Usually, their conversations were limited to just, let's train, or, are you ready for training? Most of the more interesting conversations came from Itadori himself, who wanted to know a little more about Maki. So seeing her interested in how he felt threw him off a bit. Why do I feel like you're thinking less of me? And snapping out of his stupor, he turned to see Maki staring at him with irritation. Oh, sorry about that. He said with a nervous smile, a sigh escaping his lips. And to answer your question, I really couldn't care less about what those decrepit old men want. Thanks to the events of Shibuya, Japan is in complete chaos, and I don't see them trying to calm things down. Maki nodded, understanding the boy. She could sympathize with Itadori. She was born with a purpose, to be the wife of some idiot to continue the Zenin lineage. But she decided to fight against that fate, breaking her chains through her own efforts. She didn't want to be just a disposable piece, just as Itadori didn't want to be just a vessel ready to be executed. The two had similar motivations. If they had any sense, they wouldn't have revoked your sentence. I heard you were a crucial force in Shibuya. And turning to look at him, she spoke. They don't care. I even doubt they care about the Japanese people, since they haven't made any moves to eliminate the excess curses in the cities. With a bit of irritation, Itadori replied before turning back to her. And seeing her looking at him with that weary and tired look, he gritted his teeth with regret. He had a single goal for now, to eliminate the higher-ups of the Jujutsu world, namely the elders who dictated the rules. If his memory wasn't wrong, Kenjaku should have a mole among them, and besides, they were all corrupt, true politicians. Just magical ones. They were hurting the Jujutsu world more than helping, so Itadori would take on the role that should have been Gojo's in the future. He wasn't worried at all about affecting the canon, since at this point, except for major events like Kenjaku capturing Tengen, he didn't know what would happen. So he wouldn't hold back on that. And what do you plan to do? Maki asked. And Itadori seemed to think for a moment before answering. He didn't want to involve anyone and just wanted others to know when everything was resolved. So he would have to avoid saying much more than necessary. Me? Nothing, I'll let things unfold. If they send an executioner, then I'll just beat him up and send him back. I can see that happening. Maki smiled, and continuing on her way, she left Itadori watching her back. And seeing that, Itadori couldn't help but look down. But no, he wasn't looking at her but. So that's how it works. Since he had taken Mahito's technique, his perception of souls had increased to a new level. If before he could perceive the outline of the soul, he could now see the soul. Which made it possible for him to take a good look at Maki's soul. He knew that Maki had a celestial restriction, or at least should have. But that was being limited due to Mai, since in the Jujutsu world, twins were considered the same creature. While Maki should have had a powerful physique like Toji's and zero cursed energy, the cursed energy that Mai possessed was considered Maki's as well, making it impossible for both to reach their maximum potential. And Itadori, being able to see Maki's soul, could see that. Intertwined souls. A soul that carried the essence of two beings that should be one. Confusing, certainly. But Itadori wouldn't argue with the rules of this world. At the moment, his line of thought was, can I undo this? A feeling told him yes, but for that, he needed to master idol transfiguration. Besides, he didn't know the result of doing so. In the worst case, both would die. But Itadori didn't think that would be the case, otherwise, Maki should have died along with Mai. Their souls were intertwined but not fused into one. It shouldn't be too difficult to undo this, but Itadori wasn't confident in doing so just yet. He just needed a few more days. Are you coming? And stopping when she noticed Itadori's absence, Maki turned to call him. Shoko said I shouldn't push myself, but I think a light training session wouldn't hurt. Itadori smiled at that, but seeing the moon shining in the sky, his intentions became clear. Sorry, but I have something to resolve. Maki didn't react immediately to the response, a small smile appearing on her lips before saying, all right. But you won't escape training next time, we still have unfinished business from the last match. Haha. For sure. But don't think I'll go easy on you. I'd never ask for that. Drip asterisk. In a bloody setting, Sukuna observed that interaction with interest. After trying to take control of the boy during Shibuya, his frustration only grew, especially when Itadori became more cautious in consuming the fingers. And knowing that even if he possessed the boy through a binding vow, he would only gain 10 seconds frustrated him even more. Seeing Urama improved his mood, as surely his subordinate should be making preparations to bring him back. But just sitting around was frustrating him. Returning after 1,000 years only to be imprisoned. He wanted to slit Itadori's throat with his own hands, but he knew he needed to wait for the right moment to do so. And seeing the boy interacting so intimately with the Zenin girl made him realize something. He knew exactly what to do with his 10 seconds. How is the city's situation? Walking through the abandoned streets of Shibuya, Megumi asked when he noticed Todo approaching from afar. After all the previous events, they were responsible for cleaning up the city, as Yuki seemed to be planning their next steps. But Megumi couldn't help but feel idle. The culling game had already started, and his sister was trapped in it against her will. Megumi wanted to get her out of it as quickly as possible, but he knew things weren't that simple. They needed a plan, and everyone had to cooperate, otherwise, their defeat against the curses would be inevitable. Few curses, and most of them are harmless. It seems Itadori has been very busy. Todo crossed his arms as he approached, his lips pressing together in dissatisfaction. To think he wouldn't even talk to us, we should be brothers. I bet that strange guy is trying to break our brotherhood. Megumi ignored Todo's mutterings, his distant gaze indicating he was lost in his own thoughts. As if the previous problems weren't enough, Itadori's disappearance only made Megumi more frustrated. Itadori, along with Yuta and Yuki, was a crucial piece for the battles to come. His technique was undeniably one of the most powerful of the new generation, even Gojo said so. That's why having him avoiding contact with them was so irritating. After countless times asking Itadori not to handle everything alone, the boy insisted on taking the reins. They were companions, so it was normal for Megumi to feel frustrated about this. But he couldn't entirely blame Itadori for this. If he were stronger, Itadori wouldn't need to take the lead alone. It embarrassed him, but it was a fact he needed to accept. His lack of perspective on growth was what kept him stagnant for so long. His lack of confidence limited him so much that he stopped trying to improve himself. But he would change that. Itadori was strong because he was selfish, but not in a bad way. When he felt he could do something, he did it on his own. When he felt confident in attacking, he attacked with all his might without thinking twice. If he saw an interesting technique, he didn't hesitate to take it for himself. His own technique correlated with this. If becoming stronger meant Megumi had to adopt these traits, then he would. He would become selfish. Hey, Earth to Fushiguro. Coming out of his thoughts, Megumi blinked when he noticed a hand waving in front of his face. He turned to see Nobara looking at him strangely. Geez, you and Itadori are weird. Sometimes you stare into space for several seconds. I read about this on the internet, I think it's called ADHD. Megumi frowned as he listened to her, but Nobara just stuck out her tongue mockingly. By the way, he hasn't shown up yet? No, but he was around here. Megumi said as he approached the girl, noticing some bags hanging from her arms. And what's all this? Nobara turned around when questioned, a small excited smile appearing on her lips. Designer clothes, of course. Megumi narrowed his eyes, clearly suspicious of the girl. You stole them? It's not stealing if you can't prove it. And with a quick assertion, she walked away cheerfully, leaving Megumi staring at her back in annoyance. I'm pretty sure it's still theft. Walking down that dark corridor, illuminated only by the faint candlelight that lined the entire path, Yuta Okatsu took calm but cautious steps. He felt the ripple of cursed energy in the environment, an indication that if he stepped out of line, the environment itself would punish him. Noticing this, he could see why the higher-ups were untouchable. The environment seemed to be a domain, most likely not from a person but from a powerful cursed object. Yuta felt that even he would have trouble breaking through the barriers around if he got into a fight. But he wasn't here to fight. His goal was simple, to make a binding vow with the higher-ups to kill Itadori. Of course, the higher-ups didn't need to know that he would revive him immediately afterward. This way, the higher-ups would be forced to leave his teacher's disciple alone. Perhaps it wasn't the best way to resolve things, but with Gojo sealed, Yuta didn't see many alternatives. Gojo was the only one who could declare his intention to kill the elders without being punished, due to his unparalleled strength. But Yuta was not Gojo. He could say that he would have difficulties if he got into a battle. That's why he decided on the less risky path. Stopping amidst countless floating Japanese doors around him, Yuta gave a dark look when he heard the elders' whispers. They seemed to be discussing the truthfulness of his motivations. Yuta used the idea that Sukuna was an imminent threat and was growing stronger every day. With the idea that it was only a matter of time before the King of Curses took control, Yuta told them that it was better to execute Itadori, whether he was Gojo's disciple or not. Fortunately, the elders were too blinded to notice the lies in his words, so they immediately called him to make the binding vow. Yuta Okatsu, with your desire to become the executioner of Sukuna's vessel, we intend to make a binding vow so that your mission is fulfilled. With the cursed energy oscillating abnormally around, Yuta narrowed his eyes. As requested by you, if your goal is successfully achieved, your companions will be left alone. The cursed energy fluctuated wildly, indicating that the binding vow was ready to be made. Do you accept the terms? Yuta closed his eyes for a moment, his decision made long before he arrived. Aye. But stopping his words when a tremor shook the domain around, Yuta widened his eyes in disbelief, looking up to notice a crack forming in the barrier. The domain was shaken? What is this? Who dares attack the higher-ups? One of the elders shouted angrily, his teeth clenching as the cursed energy around his body exploded. What are those incompetent guards doing? But as the elder seemed to want to complain more, his words ceased when the domain completely dissolved, the Japanese doors falling to the ground to reveal the appearance of all 6 elders present. You were the ones who wanted my head, weren't you? And with an imposing figure landing firmly on the ground, his cursed energy spread in all directions, causing pressure that made the elders sweat. Yuta watched this in surprise, his eyes landing on a head of pink hair. Then come and get it. Itadori Yuji had grown tired of others dictating his fate. Yuta hadn't gone to meet the higher-ups unprepared. He had prepared not only for a betrayal from the elders but also to circumvent the situation if they demanded exaggerated terms in the binding vote. But he could never have foreseen an attack on the elders. Gojo, being the strongest, was the only one who could launch a direct attack on the elders without fear of retaliation. In terms of power, the elders were not that powerful, fitting at most to the limit of the first grade. But in terms of experience, they could comfortably sit at the top. Of course, experience without raw power was useless to stop someone like Satoru Gojo, but it served to deal with most problems. Once, Gojo had told Yuta that the elders were feared not only for their political power but also for their strange techniques. They should be cunning enough to at least pose a risk to Yuta. That's why he was so surprised by someone deliberately attacking them. You were the ones who wanted my head, weren't you? And seeing a man with pink hair land firmly in front of him, Yuta was quick to draw his sword, his eyes narrowing as he seemed cautious. Then come and get it. Itadori stood imposingly, his cursed energy dancing around his body in an aura that tensed the elders. What is this? How dare you? One of the elders gritted his teeth at the provocation, his own cursed energy spreading through his body, but paling in comparison to the boys. Who the hell do you think you are to come here so hostilely? But stepping forward, an elder with narrow eyes advanced, his hands hidden in the sleeves of his kimono as he maintained a nonchalant aura. So the vessel of Sukuna decided to come straight here, how brave. Yuta widened his eyes, turning to see Itadori in surprise. So this is the professor's disciple? Did he come here alone? Itadori was not intimidated when the elder stepped forward, his eyes wandering over everyone in the room before landing on Yuta, his eyes shining with questioning. Looks like I arrived just in time. I hope I wasn't late. I heard you decided to revoke my sentence, so I came here with the intention of settling this once and for all. Itadori seemed confident in his words, a trait that irritated most of the elders, who sent him venomous looks. Clearly, none of them seemed to like the boy, much less what was inside him. And the elder with narrow eyes, looking more controlled than his peers, just flashed a satisfied smile, seeming to understand the situation differently. "Oh, I see. So you came to accept your sentence?" Itadori blinked in confusion, not understanding how the elder had come to that conclusion. "No, obviously not." But opening his eyes in surprise when a powerful pressure came from the elder in front of him, Itadori narrowed his eyes, noticing how the old man's cursed energy seemed greater than the other elders. "I'm sorry, but I don't see how this situation can be resolved any differently," the elder said imposingly, his cursed energy overflowing from his body in a demonstration of his high reserves. "Itadori Yuji, you have only two choices. You accept your execution, with the right to preparations for having surrendered, or you will be killed here like a damned dog." And seeming to ponder the options at his disposal, Itadori remained silent for a moment. And with a smile forming on his lips, he did not seem at all intimidated by the power demonstrated by the elder. "I think I'll create a third option." And letting the energy dance around his hand, he said confidently, "I'll kill the Jujutsu higher-ups." Boom! Flying when a blast of cursed energy hit him squarely, Itadori landed firmly on the ground, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the elder with narrow eyes pointing his palms at him. "So he's the cannon type," Itadori noted, dodging when a jet of cursed energy threatened to hit him. "It's similar to the cursed womb." And blocking a jet of energy with his own forearm, he smiled mockingly. "It's nothing special." "Insolent." One of the elders, the one with a strange pompadour, stepped forward, his eyes landing on a still surprised Yuta Okatsu. "Yuta Okatsu. As the official executor of Itadori Yuji, I order you to kill him immediately." But seeing Yuta turn to him with a questioning look, the elder felt a vein bulge on his forehead. "What the hell are you waiting for?" Yuta pressed his lips together upon receiving that order, his grip on the hilt of his sword tightening as he let the cursed energy dance around his blade. This was definitely not what Yuta had expected to happen. Facing the higher-ups was far from his expectations. But if it had already come to this point, he would not cower. Confident in himself, he would follow the last request of his teacher before being sealed. He would protect Itadori Yuji. Widening his eyes when Yuta lunged at him, the elder opened his mouth in disbelief when he felt the sorcerer's blade pierce his chest, terror filling his expression as he felt his strength ebb away. "You didn't make the binding vote, did you?" The other elders gritted their teeth in fury at the sorcerer's attack, their eyes shining with a murderous intent directed entirely at the boy. "So I can do whatever I want." Pulling the blade out in one go, Yuta watched the elder's body slump to the ground, blood pouring from his chest. "And I choose to ally with my master's disciple." Heresy. How dare you go against the elders? Jumping back when a cursed energy arrow landed in front of him, Yuta noticed an elder with a bow made of pure cursed energy in his hands. "You will pay with your lives for this insolence." But Yuta was not intimidated, and raising his sword, he let the cursed energy from his body spread in an oppressive aura. He didn't bother to respond to any of the elder's words. Boom! Jumping back when another blast of cursed energy hit in front of him, Itadori narrowed his eyes when he noticed movement in the smoke rising from the explosion, skillfully blocking a fist aimed at his face. "I can see." And retreating while blocking the narrow-eyed elder's attacks, Itadori smiled confidently. He has a lot of cursed energy, so he doesn't worry about spending it on concentrated cursed energy. It's like he's a power cannon. Hitting the boy's face with a cursed energy-charged punch, the elder was surprised when he noticed the sorcerer's hand gripping his fist. But as I said before, he's like a cursed womb. Punching the elder's stomach, Itadori made him vomit blood all at once, the old sorcerer choking as he staggered back. But that's only if we take cursed energy into account, because in a fair comparison. Raising his head with wide eyes, the elder barely reacted when a fist hit his face, his head being smashed into the concrete in a clean, precise attack. This guy is much inferior. Shaking his hand to get rid of the blood, Itadori watched Yuta facing 3 elders in direct confrontation while one attacked from a distance with cursed energy arrows. Looks like he didn't make the binding vote. And smiling with satisfaction, Itadori took a step forward. That's great. Itadori did not expect to encounter Yuta at the moment he was about to make the binding vow with the elders. To be honest, he believed he would have more time before Yuta's arrival, but that was more of a guess since he did not have a deep understanding of the timeline. But this was not an undesirable outcome, at least not the way it was happening. If Yuta had made the binding vow before he arrived, then he would certainly have problems. But that wasn't the case, so luck was clearly on his side. Because fighting by his side was the one who had the potential to take Gojo Satoru's place. Yuta Okatsu. Deflecting a cursed energy arrow with a strike from his sword, Yuta quickly moved with light steps as dozens of arrows hit the ground around him. And retreating when he noticed an elder advancing towards him, Yuta pushed him away with a kick that sent the man staggering, quickly advancing and slashing the elder's chest, who survived only by concentrating his cursed energy on his body. "You bastard," the elder snarled, and retreating, he allowed 2 other elders to advance. Yuta narrowed his eyes at this but had to focus when the 2 elders began attacking him simultaneously, forcing him to retreat while defending himself. Itadori, who observed from afar, was quite impressed with Yuta. Not only was his cursed energy meticulously concentrated to maximize his physical attributes, but he also kept a decent amount of cursed energy flowing through his sword. And that was far from all he had to offer. Just from that, he could get a small notion of Yuta's level. So he had confidence in saying that the boy was a monster. To be honest, previously, he was confident in holding his own in a fight against Yuta if the boy made the binding vow with the elders, but seeing the young sorcerer acting firsthand, he wasn't so sure. Considering only basic attributes like cursed energy control and physical attributes, Itadori did not fear Yuta. But if the boy manifested Rika, even partially, then Itadori could say that he was screwed unless he could expand his own domain. And even considering that, he wouldn't know if it would be enough, as Yuta could defeat him before his enhancement became significant. Well, at the end of the day, he had only 4 months as a sorcerer. Yuta had over a year, in addition to absurd talent. Itadori wouldn't be depressed about that. Raising his sword to block an arrow that threatened to pierce his head, Yuta widened his eyes when the 2 elders took the opportunity to advance, the palms of both hitting the sorcerer's abdomen squarely and sending him flying backward. What was that? But noticing no damage except for the impact, Yuta blinked in confusion, his eyes landing on the 2 elders, who seemed to look at him with disdain. Paralyze. And feeling his muscles tremble, Yuta was surprised when he was unable to move, noticing the elders' confident smiles. "You should have continued being an obedient little dog, boy." Hearing one of them say, Yuta raised his eyes to notice countless arrows flying towards him, his eyes narrowing as he forced his body to move. But seeing the arrows getting closer and closer, he realized he would be unable to escape in time. Re-dash. But before he could complete his call, he was surprised when a wave of flames engulfed the arrows, his head turning to see Itadori running towards him. Yuta Okatsu, right? And reaching him, Itadori surprised him by grabbing his shoulder and pulling him, saving him from a punch from the elder who had been slashed earlier. "You know me?" Yuta asked in surprise. "You use a sword and have a tremendous amount of cursed energy, it wasn't hard to connect the dots." Saying with a smile, Itadori promptly blocked the elder's attack and countered with a punch that sent him flying backward. "Why did you freeze?" Blinking as he noticed the situation they were in, Yuta was quick to respond. "It seems to be a paralysis technique from those 2. Yuji nodded, his gaze landing on the 2 elders who seemed cautious to advance. But jumping back when numerous arrows threatened to hit him, his eyes narrowed as he thought about what to do. Take care of the old man with the arrows, I'll handle these three. And declaring confidently, he moved his shoulders. But Yuta didn't seem to agree with the idea when he gave him a look. What? Are you sure about that? These guys wanted my head, so I have personal business with them. And letting the cursed energy flow through his body, Itadori took a deep breath as he took a stance, pressure exploding wildly from his body, a clear indicator of his power to the elders. Don't worry, you just need to eliminate him and return. Yuta pressed his lips but didn't contest Yuji's words. He could see that the boy was strong, and considering what Gojo had told him, there weren't many who could face him in a direct fight. Keep your distance from their hands. And leaving his warning, Yuta turned and disappeared in an explosion of speed, leaving Itadori alone with the three elders who stared at him with irritation. What's wrong? I thought you wanted to execute me. Saying disdainfully, he bounced on his feet while smiling confidently. You elders are all talk, the first one of you wasn't even fit to kill a first-grade curse. Insolent. And growling in response, the elder with the slashed chest stepped forward, cursed energy flowing wildly through his body. I will make you pay for what you did to my brother. Oh, I get it. Makes sense. Speaking with a laugh, Itadori faced the elder. So that's why someone so weak was part of the elders. I thought meritocracy was a thing dash. And feeling a vein pop in his forehead, the elder didn't let Itadori finish speaking as he advanced in an explosion of cursed energy, his fist flying towards the boy's head like a bullet. But surprised when Itadori merely moved his head slightly to the side, he didn't react when a fist smashed into his stomach, blood flying from his mouth as he staggered backward. You know, you may have a position of authority. And raising his head while struggling to recover from the damage, he noticed Itadori standing in front of him, the young sorcerer's gaze fixed on his face as powerful pressure exploded from his body. But in reality, you're nothing. No, you're less than nothing. And hitting the elder with a kick to his leg, the old man widened his eyes as he felt his knee shatter, his body collapsing as he gritted his teeth. No one will cry for your deaths, in fact, it will be beneficial to the world. And with the elder opening his mouth in disbelief, his eyes filled with fear when Itadori suddenly grabbed his head, the heat of his palm slowly increasing. So feel honored to at least serve some purpose. With the two elders advancing to rescue their companion, they couldn't do much as a pillar of flames exploded from the boy's body, the elder's charred body being revealed. And turning to the two elders, a dangerous gleam appeared in Itadori's eyes, a predatory aura covering his body entirely. Next. When the two elders advanced against Itadori, the young sorcerer narrowed his eyes as he noticed their abnormal speed. In comparison, he would easily rank them a few steps behind Jogo in that aspect. Insolent brat. Accept your fate, and die along with the demon in your body. Dodging an attempt to touch him, Itadori struck the speaking elder with a kick that sent him flying, quickly turning to face his next opponent. But no matter how fast they were, Itadori didn't have much trouble keeping up with them. As long as he stayed alert, he wouldn't need to worry about being paralyzed. Preparing to evade the second elder's hands, Itadori opened his eyes in surprise as a fist appeared in front of his eyes, his head moving just in time to escape the attack. A punch? He doesn't want to paralyze me. Blocking a flurry of attacks from the elder, Itadori landed a precise counterpunch to the old man's face, causing him to stagger. A direct confrontation. They're definitely planning something. Pushing the elder back with a kick, Yuji noticed something pass by him, his eyes narrowing as he turned in time to block a fist charged with cursed energy. This is strange, they could have paralyzed me with these two opportunities. Grabbing the elder's wrist, he quickly pulled him close and struck him with a precise punch to his solar plexus, sending him flying with a kick. Unless. Turning to look for the second elder, Itadori's eyes widened as he saw the old man about to touch him. There must be a condition for the paralysis to work. Gritting his teeth as he noticed the first elder also rushing toward him to touch him, he understood how the two's technique worked. Both of them need to touch me for the technique to work. Parley dash. With the elder's hands landing on the young sorcerer's chest and back, they seemed ready to chant, but a wave of rising heat alerted them. Eruption. Declaring this, Itadori turned to them with a victorious smile, the glow from a small volcano not far from them drawing their attention. Boom! With a jet of magma exploding toward them, the elders were unable to escape in time as the attack engulfed them, the monstrous heat burning their skin in seconds. I just need to mark a location with my cursed energy, then I can control mini volcanoes remotely. Dusting off his clothes to rid himself of the smoke, Itadori watched as the two elders collapsed to the ground. That's insane. Moving through the remnants of the elder's ancient temple, Itadori turned to see where Yuta and the last elder were battling. You were great. Seeing the last elder's body not far away and Yuta sitting while watching with a small smile was quite a surprise. Professor Gojo didn't lie when he said you were impressive. No, not really such a big surprise. In fact, Yuta defeating the elder quickly was quite expected. Itadori couldn't expect less. Well, I guess what the others said wasn't a lie either. Dusting off his clothes, Itadori approached nonchalantly, as if the previous fight hadn't even happened. You were impressive too. Yuta smiled at the compliment. So you have a technique similar to mine? Sitting on the step of a staircase, Itadori stretched, his gaze resting on the curious boy for a moment. More or less. You can use copied techniques to their full potential, right? Technically, since using them to their full potential depends on how I use them. Well, that's where we differ. When I take a technique, it becomes an extension of my technique. Choosing his next words, Itadori rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It's like gaining a skill in a game that starts at level 1. And you can use them whenever you want. How many have you copied? Looking surprised, Yuta asked. Yes, I can, although the more complex ones require me to understand and interpret them. Answering firmly, his eyes narrowed at the second question, his eyes moving to his hands as he began to count on his fingers in a way that seemed strange to Yuta. My, cuts, blood, weeds, flame on, and soul. Murmuring, he smiled as he turned to Yuta. So far, 6. And that seemed to shock Yuta, a normal reaction since, even though he could copy any technique, he couldn't use more than 3 at a time, as it could overload his brain. So knowing that Itadori could use 5 at once, and it didn't even seem to be his limit, left him quite shocked. The professor was right when he said I'd be shocked. Blinking, he rid himself of the surprise as he noticed Itadori standing up. Hey, since everything's resolved here, we should return. Turning to Yuta, Itadori offered his hand, a gesture that was promptly accepted. I'm sure some of our colleagues will be happy to see you. Yuta smiled brightly. It's been a while since I last saw them. Then let's not waste time. Smiling, he patted the boy's back friendly, making him start walking. But stopping for a moment, Itadori turned to see the lifeless bodies of the elders scattered across the temple. Contemplating what he had done for a few seconds, he just shrugged with a satisfied smile. I warned them. What? Nothing, I was just thinking out loud. While the battle at the Elders' Temple was happening, the Zenin clan seemed to be on the move. With Megumi declared the new leader of the Zenin clan after Naobito's death, Naoya, unlike the other members, seemed the most furious with the decision. Understandable, after all, as Naobito's son, he should be the only one to succeed him. Walking through the corridors with Maki and Mai's mother, Naoya couldn't suppress the killing intent exploding from his body. Where is Megumi now? And what is he doing? He asked angrily, directing his question to the woman. I don't know the details, but he seems to be looking for Yuji Itadori in Tokyo. She answered obediently. Who is that? The vessel of Sukuna. Stopping, veins bulged on the young Zenin's forehead, his murderous intent increasing shamelessly. Then tell the higher-ups that Naoya Zenin will kill Sukuna's vessel. He and Megumi must be together, right? I will kill both of them. The death of the elders didn't have a deep motive or a carefully crafted plan. Itadori had killed them simply because they were only in the way. Many sorcerers might have felt compelled to follow their orders, but that would change with their deaths. Yuji wasn't an idiot. He knew that as incompetent as the elders were, they maintained a certain order among the powerful families. Their deaths would certainly cause an uproar, and a power struggle would soon be triggered. The Zenin family would definitely be the first to make a move, but Itadori really wasn't concerned about that. If Maki didn't destroy them, then he would do it himself. Perhaps he would leave a few of them alive, the less indoctrinated ones, so the clan wouldn't be completely wiped out. Itadori hadn't thought about his own ambition in this world. Yes, he had set the goal of becoming strong to survive in this world, but that couldn't be considered his ambition. He was so focused on getting stronger that he ignored all the rot in this world. All the corruption, all the anguish, all the injustice, he simply closed his eyes to it because he knew he didn't have enough power to do anything about it. But things had changed very quickly. Now he could think carefully about it. The corruption of the Jujutsu world, the rampant strengthening of curses, the division among sorcerers, all of this had served to bring the world to this situation. The indifference of the upper echelons toward the sorcerers' problems, the lack of interest from the great families in helping, and their selfishness to remain at the top. If it weren't for this, Kenjaku would never have been able to delve so deeply into the Jujutsu world. To tell the truth, if the clans had united to prevent future problems, Kenjaku would probably already be dead or buried in some hole. It was their negligence and selfishness that led to all these devastating events. All because they were ignorant and wanted to remain in control of the Jujutsu world, like dirty politicians. But Itadori could now see this clearly, and he wanted to change it all. The death of the upper echelon was just the beginning. Before, he had no ambition other than to survive, but that had changed. If he wanted to, he could survive even if Tengen's assimilation with humanity was successful. He wanted to make real change in this world. That was his ambition. He would change the Jujutsu world into what it should really be. An act of kindness? A benevolent ambition? Partly, yes, but Itadori wasn't going to do it just for the sake of others. To maintain order and make possible the future he envisioned in this world, someone would need to be at the top to keep the clans and dishonest people in their place. And if there was no one better available, Itadori would take that place for himself. For his own sake, and so that he wouldn't have to live worrying about power-hungry idiots, he would change the Jujutsu world for the better. Zenin clan, Kamo clan, or even Gojo clan, if none of them accepted living in a world where power and fear weren't what kept them at the top, then Itadori wouldn't hesitate. He would destroy every one of them. He wouldn't allow regression just because idiots wanted to keep acting like angry primates constantly engaged in power struggles. Is there a problem? Stopping when a voice came from ahead of him, Itadori blinked in recognition, turning to see Yuta watching him with a worried look. It made him realize he had been lost in thought. Oh, nothing. Just thinking about what happened. Yuta nodded in understanding, but his concern didn't seem to fade with that answer. You don't need to be so worried. The upper echelon wasn't good for much anyway, the teacher handled most of the problems. Itadori understood that. In fact, it seemed like the upper echelon was in power only because Gojo was too lazy to take over and make real changes in the Jujutsu world. I know that. We all agree they were just corrupt, selfish old men. Shrugging, he stepped forward to walk alongside Okatsu. How have things been since I've been away? Are the others okay? Yuta asked with a small smile, a curious glint in his eyes. And Itadori couldn't help but be surprised to see that. Yuta could switch from a scary, oppressive vibe to a friendly and innocent one in an instant. It was a bit unsettling, to be honest, like an unconscious way of hiding his true intentions. Maki and Nanami suffered serious injuries. And that was the first thing Itadori mentioned, which seemed to completely wipe the brightness from the young sorcerer's eyes. Yes, I heard about that. But don't worry, Maki's already walking around, and Nanami is out of danger. Not letting the boy remain down for too long, he quickly added. That's great. The sparkle returned to his eyes faster than a bullet. Panda has been tracking the principal since the upper echelon sentenced him to death, but with the elders dead, we'll inform Mr. Yaga that he can return. Itadori continued. Inumaki is recovering from some injuries after facing numerous curses to protect some civilians, and I don't know the whereabouts of the Kyoto students, but I know Todo is with Megumi and Nobara, my first-year classmates. Yuta nodded at each new piece of information. Yuki is the one coordinating us, she's the one who saved us in the fight against the fake ghetto. Itadori blinked when he noticed Yuta's sudden silence, turning to see the boy with a somber expression. Ghetto. And with that name leaving his mouth, Itadori understood the reason for it. I'm sorry, Itadori. If I had eliminated him, none of this would be happening. Itadori stared at him for a few seconds, recognizing the sincerity in that apology. He didn't blame Yuta. No one would have expected someone to be lurking, just waiting to steal the body of Satoru Gojo's best friend. Besides, he was a novice at that time. Being forced to fight for his life and the lives of his companions wasn't something a novice could have expected to do. No one would blame him for any of it. There's no need to dwell on the past, you don't owe anyone an apology. With a small smile, Itadori gave him a friendly pat on the back. We have more important things to worry about than finding someone to blame. Yuta nodded, but the light in his eyes clearly indicated he wasn't satisfied, not with himself. Anyway, we're here. And stopping at the entrance to Jujutsu High, Itadori declared with a relieved sigh. He hadn't realized how tense he was until he reached his comfort zone. Maybe thinking about his future plans had left him a bit overwhelmed. Oh, I didn't think I'd see you two arriving together. And the first person to greet them was none other than Yuki Tsukumo, the special grade sorcerer second only to Gojo. Itadori liked her. She seemed like a fun woman to talk to, and she had a very pleasant aura. Maybe his taste in women was affecting his judgment, but he didn't feel he was wrong. We ended up running into each other along the way. Yuta explained, stepping forward to greet the woman. Thank you for saving my comrades, Miss Tsukumo. No need to be so formal, kid. I wouldn't leave such promising young ones behind. With a friendly smile for Yuta, she turned with a curious look at Itadori. And you? Itadori blinked at the question, pointing to himself in curiosity. What about me? How was your walk? Choso's been worried since you left. Itadori stared at her in silence, his mind drifting to the crushed face and incinerated bodies of the elders. The elders are dead. And without any pretense, he declared it bluntly. There was no point in hiding it. Oh, that's great. And not processing that statement for a moment, Yuki froze before finishing, her eyes widening as disbelief slowly took over her face. What? Itadori chuckled at the woman's stunned reaction, while Yuta just scratched his head in embarrassment. Yuji, you're back. And turning as a shout sounded in the distance, Itadori saw Choso running at full speed towards him, colliding with him and pulling him into a hug. Are you okay? Did you get hurt? No, I'm fine. That's great. And with a smile as Choso inspected him from head to toe, Itadori sighed as the tension left his body completely. Well, maybe his ambition was very much related to making life better for these people. As rotten as the elders were, they were undeniably one of the pillars of the Jujutsu world. In any normal situation, their deaths would have led to a civil war in the Jujutsu world, but fortunately, with the culling game underway, the other clans were too preoccupied with their own disputes to fight each other. At least, that was the case for everyone except the Zenin clan, who saw this as an opportunity to thrive. News traveled fast. It took only a day for everyone to learn the whereabouts of the high-ranking officials. Needless to say, this excited the members of the Taboo clan. But even though they were excited, they were not the leaders who would decide the clan's next steps. Megumi Fushiguro was. But in the eyes of the clan, that would change soon. There was no way Naoya, or other more prideful members, would accept Megumi as the clan leader. Some of them would rather die than accept that. Knowing this, it wasn't foolish to believe that the clan was planning ways to eliminate Megumi. But that didn't matter for now, because the sorcerers had more important things to worry about than a few petty idiots. Principal Yaga, Principal Gakuganji, it's been a while since I've seen you both. Seeing the two principals arriving at the school entrance, Yuki greeted them with a smile. She wouldn't lie and say she hadn't been worried after hearing about Yaga's execution order. Yuki Tsukumo, it's a surprise to find you here. The old Gakuganji was the first to speak, resting his cane on the ground as he stopped in front of the woman. I thought you'd continue avoiding your duties for a bit longer before returning. A forced smile spread across the woman's lips. Well, my juniors needed help. Yaga didn't react to the interaction between the two, a sigh escaping his lips. What happened, Yuki? With that question, Yuki's tone changed, her expression filling with seriousness. Yuta and Itadori got into a fight with the high-ranking officials. The rest you probably already know. That's not what I expected to hear. Yaga rubbed his face with his hands, clearly disturbed by that information. But you're alive because of them, so why worry so much? Dropping her serious look, she smiled as she turned to walk toward the bunker. At the end of the day, the high-ranking officials weren't serving any purpose anymore. Leaving a silent Yaga behind, she started to walk away. She's right, you know. Passing by him, Gakuganji said, which seemed to surprise Yaga. It's been a while since I realized that the actions of the high-ranking officials were no longer aimed at the prosperity of the Jujutsu world. No one will mourn their deaths. Of all people, Gakuganji was the last person Yaga expected to hear this from. But it made sense. The moment the death of the high-ranking officials became known, the Kyoto principal eliminated the elder's subordinate with a single attack and released him afterward. He could say that the old man had changed. Perhaps this was mainly due to the bad decisions the elders had made in recent years. Yes, you're right. And with a sigh, he began walking alongside the principal. He wouldn't worry about the disorder caused by the deaths of the high-ranking officials. He had more important things to take care of. Walking through the school campus, Itadori didn't take long to find what he was looking for. In the distance, he could see Maki, Inumaki, Panda, and Yuta sitting on the steps leading to the training field. A very familiar sight, as he remembered seeing the first three in the same position before all of this. How's everyone doing? Announcing his presence, he asked as he approached, causing them to turn to see him. Oh, Itadori. Being the first to stand up, Panda stopped in front of Itadori, making the young sorcerer raise an eyebrow. Accept this Panda's thanks for what you did. Seeing him bow, Itadori seemed surprised for a moment, his eyes shifting to see Yuta rubbing his neck in embarrassment. Damn. I plan to blame everything on Yuta. No need to thank me, Panda. Giving a small smile, he patted the big bear's fur. I just did what should have been done. No. If you hadn't done what you did, Maida, Principal Yaga would have been killed. I'm grateful. Letting out a sigh, realizing he wouldn't back down, Itadori nodded. Alright, I'll accept your thanks. It's not every day that a panda bows in gratitude. Definitely. And smiling, Panda returned to normal. As the two rejoined the group, Itadori noticed Inumaki was completely bandaged. The group of curses he had faced must have been quite large. "How are your injuries?" he asked, addressing Maki and Inumaki. "Salmon. I'll be back to normal after one more healing session," Maki replied. Although he didn't understand Inumaki, he took the response as an "I'm fine," nodding to both of their answers. "That's great to hear." He smiled at Maki, who just stared at him for a few seconds before looking away. "Itadori, you haven't forgotten what I said, have you?" Speaking, Maki didn't look at him as she stood up. Itadori blinked at that, noticing how the girl began descending the stairs toward the training field. And with the realization of their last conversation hitting him, he nodded as he waved to the others, starting to follow her. Of course not. This seemed to confuse Yuta, who turned to Panda for answers. Panda could only raise his hands in confusion, as he also didn't know what they were talking about. "Unfinished business, you said?" Grabbing a wooden sword from a rack, he smirked as he stopped in the center of the field, noticing Maki taking her own sword and walking towards him. "If I remember correctly, I won last time. We're tied, remember?" Returning the smile, the girl positioned herself in front of him, raising her sword as she took a stance. "Let's settle this." Itadori raised his sword, his grip tightening as he prevented his body from being strengthened by cursed energy. "Definitely." Among the spectators, Yuta blinked in confusion, pointing toward the two as he turned to Panda and Inumaki. "They're tied?" The day was November 7th, a calm morning for nature. But even though the environment seemed peaceful on the surface, the tension was palpable among the sorcerers. Plans upon plans were being formulated to find ways to end the culling game. Plans full of flaws and inconsistencies, a sign that it was inevitable they would need Tengen's counsel. Something that didn't sit well with Yuki. Unfortunately, she would have to give in to meet with the one who once wanted her body to merge with. Needless to say, her mood wasn't the best, but in the end, she had only delayed the inevitable. Itadori observed this from afar and decided not to get involved. He preferred to leave all the planning in the hands of Yaga and Yuki, and he would follow whatever they proposed, as long as he didn't see their plans putting them in a difficult situation. But to be honest, he already had most of his steps planned out. Whatever plan the two had, it wouldn't affect him in any way. In the past few days, he had been practicing with idol transfiguration non-stop. His sleep had been greatly affected because of it, but realizing he was evolving with each practice numbed his need for sleep. But after achieving what he wanted, he decided to give himself a good night's rest. Ah, damn. Taking a sip of his hot chocolate, Itadori sighed in satisfaction, his eyes resting on the training field he could see from the balcony of his room. How long has it been since I drank this? 2 years. Taking another sip, he savored the taste of the chocolate, letting his body relax with the warmth it brought. Mojito's technique wasn't complex in its definition, but its use required meticulous effort. Itadori couldn't tell if Mojito had such ease because of his cursed body or if he was naturally talented with his own technique. Itadori had to be careful not to break his soul while reshaping its form. Normally, it was a complicated process and not very viable in battles where he needed to focus on the fight. Fortunately, he didn't intend to use this in battle. At least not for now. His current goal with idol transfiguration was a single, greedy goal. He wanted to be able to create clones that retained at least 70% of his strength, which also meant the clone would be able to use his techniques. But that was very difficult to achieve, and his best result so far was a clone with 30% of his power, capable only of using cursed energy to fight. It wasn't what he wanted, but it was, in a way, a victory. It showed that he was on the right path. Looks like you're already awake. Taking a sip of his chocolate, he blinked when a voice sounded beside him, turning to see Maki, bundled up in warm clothes, walking toward him. Did you sleep well? Opening a small smile, he placed his cup on the balcony. Yes, very well, actually. And noticing his small smile, Maki closed her eyes in an attempt to ignore it, simply resting her arms on the balcony beside him. Being able to sleep well after yesterday's beating? Man, you're a cold woman. Receiving a punch in the arm, Itadori laughed, turning to see the girl glaring at him with irritation. I only remember you barely landing a hit on me. Of course you remember that. You must have passed out afterward. Idiot. Controlling his laughter, he sighed as he turned to her while taking another sip of his chocolate. And Maki, merely shrugging at his antics, stared at him for a few seconds as a realization came to her. In the past month of training and talking with Itadori, she realized that this is the first time I've seen him laugh. Maki, being a focused person, didn't laugh much either, but she would sometimes give in to the antics of her companions. But Itadori was different. She realized she had never seen him laugh. Smile a few times, yes, but laugh, no. Was that just in her head? Or did it mean something? No, I must be overthinking this. And sighing, she pushed those thoughts away, her eyes drifting over to Itadori as he peacefully drank from his cup. And noticing her gaze on him, Itadori turned to her with a smile. Want some? Maki blinked, looking a bit surprised when he held the cup out to her, her hands slowly moving to take it. Thanks. She sniffed, the sweet aroma of chocolate filling her nostrils and bringing her a great feeling. Something she hadn't tasted in a long time. Sip. And taking a sip of the chocolate, a small smile appeared on her lips. This is good. I know, right? I learned it from a video on how to make the perfect hot chocolate. Itadori spoke enthusiastically, clearly excited that Maki liked it. The girl's lips twitched at this. Well, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's decent. His smile fading, Itadori narrowed his eyes. Surprising her when the cup disappeared from her hands, Maki turned to see Itadori drinking the rest of it at an alarming rate. Hey! Ah! Finishing the chocolate, Itadori sighed in satisfaction, turning to Maki with a small smile. If you were a bit more humble, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But interrupted when his hand was suddenly struck, Itadori watched as his bare cup, a gift from Gojo, flew away. You got on my nerves. And turning when he heard her, Itadori saw Maki about to swing a wooden sword at him. Where did she get that? Had she already planned to catch me awake? Dodging to the side as the wooden blade threatened to hit his head, Itadori quickly ran toward the training field, with Maki in pursuit. Come back here. Catch me. And with a laugh, he declared while running across the training field, Maki in tow. On the dormitory balcony, the second-year group silently watched the interaction between the two. Yuta observed the situation for several seconds before Panda patted him on the shoulder. I think I heard Director Yaga calling us, Yuta. Yeah. Choso had thought countless times. Over the past few days, watching his younger brother striving to save people, fighting to continue living as a human, he had reflected. He had worried about Itadori. But did he have the right? Did he have the right to feel bad for Itadori? Even when he was one of the forerunners of so much disaster? Men, women, children, the elderly. He had killed so many people in Shibuya. What would Itadori think if he knew? Would their friendly conversations still exist? Would he be able to see him as an older brother in the future? No, of course not. If Choso were in Itadori's place, he wouldn't forgive him for that. But, if Choso had forgiven Yuji for killing his brothers, then he... No, Yuji hadn't killed Eso and Akizu. Choso was responsible for their deaths. He couldn't run away from that fact, no matter how hard he tried. If instead of choosing to live as curses, Choso had chosen to live as humans, Eso and Akizu wouldn't have needed to die. Nor would he have killed so many innocent people. The if was something painful to imagine, but undeniably necessary. If Choso had made different choices, all of his brothers would be fighting side by side. Maybe Noritoshi Kamo wouldn't have been able to go so far. Choso blamed himself for that. What's this darkness? As the room's lights suddenly turned on, Choso squinted, confronted by the sudden brightness, turning to see Yuki Tsukumo at the entrance of the room. "Oh, it's you, Choso." With a smile spreading across her lips, the woman approached, noticing Choso sitting in a chair near the table. "What are you doing in the kitchen at this hour?" "I can't sleep." Responding blandly, Choso crossed his arms with a shrug. Yuki observed him for a few seconds before moving to the fridge and filling a glass with milk, turning and sitting in the chair across from the death painting. "You seem down, care to share a bit about what's on your mind?" Faced with the question, Choso just turned his gaze to the table. Yuki Tsukumo was an energetic woman. Choso didn't really have a solid opinion of her, except that she seemed bold. They had spoken a few times, conversations the woman herself had initiated. She seemed particularly interested in talking to him, Choso could tell that. The reason? Choso had no idea. But as much as he could appreciate her attempts to get close, Choso had no intention of opening up. To the death painting, Yuki was nothing more than an ally. "Is it about Itadori?" Choso's eyebrow twitched at the question, Yuki noticing it with a smile. "I see. He seems to like you," Yuki said as she took a sip, her eyes never leaving Choso, just to see the face of the death painting light up. Her bait seemed to have hit the mark. "Did he say something?" Choso asked a bit more eagerly, his eyes turning to the woman, who looked back at him with a satisfied smile. "Well, this is based on what I've noticed. Besides, he spoke well of you to Principal Yaga." "That's good." And with a small smile forming on the death painting's lips, Yuki let out a light laugh. It seemed that even a death painting couldn't help but be pleased at the realization that someone important had spoken well of him to others. "You and Itadori seem to have become quite close since Shibuya. I'd like to know more about that, if I'm not being too intrusive." Resting her chin on her hands, Yuki asked with a curious tone. Choso observed her in silence, his gaze wandering around the room for a moment before he turned back to the woman with a shrug. At the end of the day, they were allies. There was no need to hide, especially when it was something Choso didn't care to keep secret. "Noritoshi Kamo was the one who violated my mother. He is my progenitor and my brothers," Choso explained with a sigh. "I can feel my brothers, our souls are intertwined by brotherhood, and as the older brother, I have a heightened sensitivity to them. That's how I discovered that Yuji was actually one of my brothers." Yuki blinked, clearly surprised by that information. From conversations she'd had with Todo and the second-year students, she believed that Choso thinking Itadori was his brother was due to an unconscious ability of the boy. Strange pheromones, as Panda believed. But this changed things a bit. Somehow, Noritoshi Kamo switched bodies and continued with his goals of spreading misery. At some point, he must have impregnated a woman, consequently giving life to Yuji. Yuki narrowed her eyes. If that were really true, it was impossible that Yuji's abilities were just a coincidence. A powerful innate technique, and a body capable of imprisoning the king of curses without giving in. Yuki would bet her hair that this wasn't just chance. Noritoshi Kamo must have something planned. It doesn't matter if we're not bound by blood, I can feel our connection. I am his older brother. And with a satisfied nod, Choso declared confidently, turning to see Yuki observing him in silence. "Oh, a stubborn man." Yuki smiled, clearly enjoying the death painting's attitude. "Can I ask you a question, Choso?" Choso raised an eyebrow, signaling for the woman to continue. "What's your type of woman?" What a strange woman Yuki Tsukumo was. Appearing on top of a building, Naoya Zenin observed the devastated scene of what was once the bustling city of Shibuya with narrowed eyes. This smell of decomposing bodies is disgusting. Spitting, he shrugged, his eyes moving as he noticed numerous cursed energy signatures. There are still many curses around here. What are the incompetent jujitsu school people doing? Firmly positioning himself at the edge of the building, he continued searching for different signatures. It's not an unexpected result when so much responsibility is placed on a bunch of useless people. As his eyes wandered over the city, he stopped when he noticed a different signature, a smile spreading when he spotted a boy with black hair accompanied by two others finishing off a large curse. "I've found you, Megumi Fushiguro." How many days had passed? Megumi had lost track of time a while ago. In his constant routine of hunting and killing curses, he became so focused that he completely forgot his surroundings. Maybe this was his mind's way of coping with the weight on his shoulders. The culling game was a sick game where countless jujitsu sorcerers would face off in a wild killing spree. But Megumi shouldn't be so worried if that was all there was to it. As long as they freed Gojo, their teacher could solve everything with one hand tied behind his back. What troubled Megumi was the fact that his sister, Tsumaki, was tied to the game. They didn't know how long it would take to release Gojo from the seal, so the sooner Tsumaki was unbound from the game, the better. He didn't want to take any risks since he didn't know if there was a penalty for those who refused to participate. Just the thought of something like that was enough to unsettle Megumi. But thinking about the problems wouldn't help. It would only add more mental pressure on him. The most he could do at the moment was wait for Yuki's signal to return. "What are you guys doing?" Blinking when a voice sounded next to him, Megumi snapped back to reality, noticing the fire burning in front of him. "Just resting, looks like we'll be called back at any moment." Todo, sitting close to the fire, was the one who answered. Turning around, Megumi noticed Nobara walking toward them, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. "Where were you?" Smiling at the question, Nobara flipped her hair, her shiny locks showing how well maintained they were. "Enjoying a spa day at a hotel. Too bad there were no masseuses, though." Megumi narrowed his eyes. "You slept in a hotel while we were sleeping in front of a campfire?" Faced with the question, Nobara blinked indifferently. "The power wasn't out, you know. There was no need for you guys to make a campfire." A click went off in Todoa's head, and clapping his palm in realization, he smiled. "Oh, that's why the streetlights were still on. Damn, we missed that." A vein bulged on Megumi's forehead. In moments like this, he missed Itadori. "Well, it's good they're calling us back. I was starting to get tired of enjoying all this free stuff." Clearing the ground, Nobara sat down in front of the fire. Megumi sighed as he heard her. In the end, scolding her wouldn't do any good, as previous attempts had already indicated. "Once we get back, we'll talk to Tengen. He'll give us a better idea of what to do," Megumi explained, receiving nods from the other two sorcerers. "Man, I've always wanted to see what Tengen looks like," Nobara shared, with Todo seeming to have the same thought. "My master doesn't seem to like him." Todo crossed his arms, remembering how Yuki always hated when Tengen's name was mentioned. Megumi remained silent. He didn't really care about Tengen's appearance. As long as he could help them, he could be the ugliest thing in the world, and Megumi still wouldn't care. "Alright, since we're about to return anyway, let's put in a little extra effort to clear this area." Standing up, Todo stretched his arms. "I can still sense some curses around." Megumi nodded, and getting up, he cracked his knuckles and began to stretch, a relieved sigh escaping his lips. "You guys are annoying," Nobara grumbled, a curious look crossing her face. "I wonder if Itadori is already there." Probably, the last thing he said was that he'd kill as many curses as possible before returning. Megumi turned to her, recalling the day after the events of Shibuya, his mind drifting to the somber expression of the sorcerer. I hope he's moved on. Nobara nodded, standing up with some reluctance. Damn, I just wanted to sleep for a few more hours. Get more excited, freshman. Todo exclaimed with a grin, Nobara responding with an annoyed glare. Easy for you to say, you guys have fun with anything. Todo let out a laugh. He had enjoyed interacting with these two over the past few days. Even if Megumi's taste in women was boring. Alright, let's get moving. Todo declared, and the other two nodded. But just as they were about to move to hunt curses, Todo froze when he noticed a strange cursed energy signature, turning to see a man sitting calmly on a wall. It took Megumi and Nobara a moment to realize the new presence, but they quickly assumed a defensive stance when they did. Who's this guy? Todo narrowed his eyes, noting how the stranger's aura seemed to ripple. He feels dangerous. So, you're Megumi Fushiguro. The stranger suddenly spoke, putting the three sorcerers on high alert. I thought you'd look better. From here, you don't seem like much. Who are you? Megumi narrowed his eyes. Having someone know him only to say he wasn't much didn't seem like a good sign. Naoya Zenin, it's a displeasure. Naoya spat on the ground, and leaping off the wall, he smiled as he noticed the sorcerer's recoil when he landed. Why the fear? He's from that idiot clan that kicked Maki out? Nobara turned to Megumi, the somber boy only nodding in agreement. Hey! But with a snap of his fingers, Nobara turned to see Naoya glaring at her in irritation. Shut up and let the men talk. What? A vein bulged on Nobara's forehead, a forced smile spreading across her face as she quickly slipped a few nails between her fingers. Why don't you repeat that, you piece of trash? Sigh. Rubbing his face in boredom, Naoya stared at the three with a disinterested look. Despite your sharp tongue, you have a decent body and a rather pretty face, but... Smiling maliciously, Naoya's cursed energy began to concentrate in his body, with Todo being the first to notice. A woman who doesn't walk 3 steps behind a man should be stabbed and killed. So, I'll start with you. Leaving a trail of speed, Naoya startled the three as he disappeared, Todo's eyes widening as he turned to protect Nobara. He's fast. Boom. But surprised as his chest was struck, Todo spat blood as he staggered back, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face Naoya's scornful expression. Fooled you. Sending Todo flying with a kick, Naoya dusted off his clothes with a sigh. Todo Aoi, first-grade sorcerer. Turning to see the shocked expressions of the other two, Naoya crossed his arms with a disinterested look. He's been my target from the start. Easier to fool than I expected. Sweat dripped down Megumi's face, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face Naoya. Damn, this guy's going to be trouble. When that wooden blade was reflected by a counterattack, the sound of the clash between the two forces echoed throughout the training field. On one side, Itadori demonstrated superiority when his blade broke through his opponent's defense, forcing him to retreat quickly to avoid being hit. On the other side, Yuta struggled to defend against a barrage of attacks that hit his defense relentlessly, his teeth gritting as he continued to backpedal. After several training sessions alongside all the second years, it was Itadori who suggested that the two engage in a friendly match to test each other's combat proficiency. Yuta, at first, didn't seem too thrilled with the idea, but something deep in his mind urged him to accept. A desire to prove himself? Yuta didn't know, and he didn't stop to think much when he accepted. That's how the two ended up in this situation. Despite having seen Itadori fight evenly with Maki, he was still surprised when Itadori demonstrated an intimidating strength. Fighting without reinforcing his body with cursed energy, Yuta found himself completely overpowered, as Yuji strikes were not only strong but also fast. But he didn't give in, even when his defense was broken once again. Even though this was just a friendly match, he didn't want to lose. So, the moment Itadori attacked, Yuta anticipated it and skillfully blocked the strike, diverting its trajectory to the ground, creating an opening to advance against the younger fighter. And just as he was about to hit his opponent's face with the handle of his wooden sword, his eyes widened in surprise when Itadori grabbed the handle with his free hand. This drew a nervous smile from Yuta, who was then hit by an elbow, forcing him to retreat. "He's just like Maki," Yuta sniffed, noticing how Itadori seemed ready to advance. "No, he's even stronger." Blocking a powerful strike, Yuta gritted his teeth as he struggled to keep Yuji's sword handle away from his face, his arms trembling as the battle of strength dragged on for a few more seconds. "I need to disarm him." Retreating to avoid a blow, Yuta narrowed his eyes as Itadori pursued him, his lips tightening as he followed the boy's movements, looking for an opening. Now! Seeing an opportunity when Itadori raised his sword to attack, Yuta propelled himself forward and struck his hand, sending the wooden sword flying. "Now's my chance. I have the upper hand." But as he moved to launch his counterattack, Yuta was taken aback when a fist struck the handle of his sword with enough force to make him stumble backward. "What?" Yuta's eyes widened, quickly raising his sword to block a wave of punches that pounded his defense relentlessly. "He's even faster than before." Leaping to dodge a sweeping kick, Yuta gasped when Itadori placed his hands on the ground and rotated his body, landing a kick to Yuta's stomach. "I was wrong." Landing on the ground, Yuta wiped the saliva from his lips, his eyes locking onto Itadori as he noticed an oppressive aura erupting from the boy's body. "Disarming him doesn't give me an advantage." Raising his sword in an attempt to deflect a punch, Yuta gritted his teeth as a kick hit his thigh instead. It's the exact opposite. With his training, Yuta was confident that his skills had improved a lot. His hand-to-hand combat was at a decent level, enough for him to feel comfortable engaging in direct confrontations if necessary. But face-to-face with someone like Itadori, he could tell there was no way to compete. Itadori's skills with his fists seemed to be on a different level. Combined with the boy's powerful body, it was impossible for Yuta to compete in a direct confrontation. Unfortunately, this was something he realized too late. With a kick hitting his hand, Yuta found himself in a tough spot as he watched his sword fly away, sweat accumulating on his face as Itadori advanced toward him. As the sounds of blows echoed through the arena, the second-year students watched the match in silence, with Panda being the only one to say anything as the fight dragged on into a fistfight. They seemed to be taking this way too seriously. Panda said, an uncomfortable expression appearing on his bear-like face as Yuta took a hard punch to the forearm. "Shouldn't we stop them?" Salmon. Inumaki nodded. "I don't think so," Maki disagreed, arms crossed as she watched closely. Yuta made the fight comfortable for Itadori, which gives us the impression they're taking it too seriously because one side is dominating completely. In reality, Yuta is just defending as best he can. "Oh, I see." Nodding in recognition, Panda agreed. "Still, it feels like Yuta is taking this too seriously. I didn't expect Itadori to be able to dominate Yuta in a fight so easily. I guess it's because neither of them is using cursed energy." Panda scratched his chin, his eyes still focused on the ongoing fight. "Salmon. Maki smiled at that, her mind drifting to all the sparring matches she and Itadori had. His improvement from one training session to the next was astronomical, so drastic that it even made her a bit envious. "Of course, he's been training with me all this time, after all." "Oh, yes, your training sessions with him," Panda said suggestively. This made Maki frown, her fist hitting Panda's arm, causing him to smile. "Shut up." "Oh, looks like it's over." Back on the training field, Yuta was panting as he lay on his back, a few bruises visible on his body. That was fun. With a shadow looming over him, Yuta opened his eyes to see a smiling Itadori offering a hand. "Thanks for the training, Yuta." Yuta gave a small smile and, accepting the hand, pushed away the depressing thoughts about his loss. Thank you as well. I learned a lot. Maybe next time we can use cursed energy in our training. Itadori suggested. Yuta nodded, though the thought of being hit by Itadori's cursed energy-imbued attacks wasn't particularly appealing. Sure. As the two returned to the group, Panda and Inumaki applauded their performance, while Maki simply kept her arms crossed with a small smile. You guys were great. Panda exclaimed enthusiastically. Salmon. Inumaki seemed to agree. You did well, Maki complimented. Yuta nervously rubbed the back of his neck at the praise, and Itadori simply smiled, with Maki trying to remain humble. Looks like you guys finished just in time. With a new voice grabbing their attention, the group turned to see Yuki and Choso approaching. Itadori raised an eyebrow at this. He had noticed that his brother seemed a little closer to the sorceress since she arrived. What's going on, Miss Yuki? Yuta asked. Yuki scratched her head, a bit of frustration showing on her face, which Itadori noticed with a frown. Well, something is making it difficult to communicate with Todoa's group, so we need a few of you to go check on them. Since we're short on staff, there's no one else to ask. The group nodded, Itadori rubbing his chin as he seemed to ponder the situation. He doubted any curse in the city could harm his comrades, especially with Todo with them. Maybe the communication issue was related to the culling game, but Itadori couldn't say for sure. The safety of Megumi and Nobara didn't worry him, he had seen their improvements firsthand. I'll go. Stepping forward, Itadori volunteered. Still, that didn't stop the small spark of uncertainty in the back of his mind. Are you sure, Itadori? You just got back. Yuki seemed genuinely concerned, something that seemed to please Choso, judging by the small smile that spread across his lips. I just need to find them and return, no big deal. The group didn't seem to disagree, simply nodding in response. Alright then, get a few things ready. They shouldn't be far, but it's good to be a little prepared. Yuki said, and Itadori nodded. Menteko. Looking at the man who had attacked them, Megumi felt sweat trickling down the back of his neck, his fingers tightening into his palm as he analyzed the situation. 1 second? No, it had been less. Naoya had attacked Todo in less than a second, at a speed that Megumi struggled to follow. This scared the Dark Sorcerer even more when he noticed that Todo showed no signs of getting up anytime soon. He hit a vital point. Megumi pressed his lips together, his eyes turning to see Naoya with a satisfied smile. Damn, I need to find a way to escape with Kujisaki. What do you want? Megumi asked with a hint of irritation, deciding to try to get some information out of the enemy and figure out why he had attacked them. Maybe he had a chance to bargain. You don't know? Damn, my expectations were low, but you still managed to disappoint me. Naoya mocked, causing a vein to bulge on Megumi's forehead. Well, I'll explain it only once, so listen carefully, you trash. It seems that somehow, you've been declared the leader of the Zenin clan, so I decided to come here and congratulate you. Doesn't that sound nice? Megumi narrowed his eyes, turning to see a bruised Todo not far away. That doesn't seem like a good way to congratulate someone, Nobara spoke, her eyes widening in disbelief as Naoya vanished in a flash step, a hand landing firmly on her shoulder. Hey! Turning around, she noticed Naoya staring at her with a slight smile. Why don't you shut up for once? Kujisaki dash. Megumi tried to move, but even his words were too slow as a fist struck Nobara's stomach, blood spraying from her mouth as she was thrown away. Ugh! Naoya shook his hand to rid it of the blood, his expression irritated. Normally, I treat women with a bit more delicacy. But today, I'm a little pissed off. Megumi growled, his hands coming together in anticipation as he seemed ready to summon. Congratulate me? Don't make me laugh. Ha! It seems you saw right through me, how surprising. Naoya clapped, a clear tone of mockery in his words. I'm not really here to congratulate you. In fact, even saying it makes me sick. Megumi's eyes widened as Naoya suddenly closed the distance, a shadow appearing beneath his feet, allowing him to slide back and dodge a punch. I'm here to kill you. Struggling to block a punch, Megumi gritted his teeth as a barrage of blows landed on his face. He's too fast. Trying to fight through the wave of attacks with his own punch, Megumi gasped as his liver was struck. Damn, I thought you were going to be more interesting. Naoya declared disdainfully before shoving the sorcerer away with a kick. But you can't even react to my attacks. Megumi wiped the blood from his lips, a forced smile forming as he turned to Naoya, the thin veins in his eyes becoming more prominent as he clasped his hands together. If I can't keep up with him, then I just need someone who can. Naoya raised an eyebrow at this, noticing how a pool of shadow appeared in front of the boy. Divine Dog, Totality. With a claw emerging from the shadows, Naoya narrowed his eyes as a werewolf fully revealed itself. Seems like you've got some interesting tricks up your sleeve. And disappearing in a flash step, Naoya charged at the wolf. But that doesn't change anything. Just as he was about to strike the Shikigami, Naoya's eyes widened as the wolf attacked before he could reach it, causing him to halt his momentum and retreat with a quick movement. Did it see my movements? Turning to Megumi, Naoya clenched his teeth as he noticed the sorcerer smiling disdainfully at him, the veins on his forehead standing out as he seemed to grow angrier. You bastard! You think this mud is going to help you? I'll show you. Bursting toward the wolf, Naoya skillfully dodged the Shikigami's claws and landed a solid punch on its stomach, the werewolf being pushed back with a mark on its abdomen. It can perceive my movements, but it can't keep up with me. Naoya smiled, dodging another claw as he unleashed a flurry of attacks on the wolf. What a joke! As he continued his assault, ready to finish off the Shikigami by stabbing its chest, Naoya's eyes widened when suddenly, something slimy wrapped around his wrist. He turned his head to see what appeared to be a tongue. This isn't one-on-one, Megumi declared with disdain, causing Naoya's eyes to widen. But before he could try to escape, the divine dog was quicker, its claws tearing into Naoya's chest and sending him flying. But the attack didn't end there as Megumi's frog's tongue pulled Naoya towards him, Megumi punishing him with a flurry of blows before sending him flying with a kick. You bastard! Naoya growled as he steadied himself, spitting out some blood before charging at Megumi. The younger sorcerer narrowed his eyes at Naoya's rapid movement, his hands already together in anticipation as he seemed to prepare. Even though he couldn't properly keep up with the Zenin's movements, Megumi still demonstrated a combat sense that caught Naoya by surprise. Because the moment Zenin reached him, a pool of darkness appeared beneath his feet, causing him to lose his balance. New. Seizing the moment, Megumi quickly summoned his flying Shikigami, which aggressively struck Naoya, the impact sending him flying back while the electricity served to immobilize him for a moment. Now! Megumi charged along with the divine dog, the sorcerer grabbing a black sword that emerged from a pool of shadows. But just as they seemed about to reach him, Megumi's eyes widened in horror as Naoya disappeared in a flash step, the divine dog beside him being sent flying. He can move even when electrocuted? Megumi turned in an attempt to defend himself, but there was nothing he could do as Naoya's palm touched his chest. Damn! With his body becoming the frame of a picture, Naoya spat out some blood before glaring at Megumi in irritation. You trash, all of this was nothing but luck. And imbuing his fist with cursed energy, he prepared. But it doesn't matter. In the end, there's only one outcome. Boom! Striking the frame, Megumi flew as he vomited blood, his back crashing violently to the ground. Damn, I was too hasty. Ignoring the excruciating pain that coursed through his body, Megumi got up to see Naoya already charging at him. I need to move. Clap. Blinking, Megumi seemed confused when he found himself looking at Naoya from afar, turning to see a smiling Todo beside him. That first hit got me good. Todo wiped the blood from his lips, his expression hardening as he took a step forward. Hey, idiot from the clan of idiots. What's your type of woman? Walking through that city devastated by curses, Itadori whistled when he noticed several cursed energy signatures scattered throughout the area, an indication that curses had been taken down in that place. They did a good job, he praised Megumi's group. Kenjaku had released hundreds of curses when he escaped with Urama, among them some considerably powerful ones. Although Yuji and Choso had eliminated the more troublesome ones, Megumi, Todo, and Nobara had still done a good job of taking down the mid-level or lower curses. Itadori could tell it would take time to fully clear the city, so he couldn't help but praise them. What are you thinking, boy? Blinking when a voice suddenly sounded, Itadori looked down to notice a mouth on his palm, his eyes narrowing at it. It had been quite a while since his last interaction with Sukuna, so seeing him initiate a conversation was rather suspicious. And why does that interest you? I thought you only cared about things like blood and guts. Or something like that, he said, deciding not to dismiss Sukuna, adding with a bit of mockery, wait, can't you access my thoughts? Damn, that's embarrassing for someone who's supposed to be the king of curses. With Sukuna's silence, Yuji smiled as he imagined the annoyed expression on his face. You seem quite confident, brat. I wouldn't be so carefree. Itadori pretended to shiver. Ooh, scary. Why don't you go back to wherever you've been hiding and leave me alone? Sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? I do my thing, and you stay locked up like a rat. Shifting his mouth into a toothy grin, Sukuna's eye glared at the boy, the red veins in his eyes pulsing as a sign of his irritation. For a snot-nosed kid, you've got a sharp tongue. A sigh escaped Itadori's lips, noticing how that conversation was going nowhere. If you're just going to keep insulting me as a desperate way to feel powerful, then we're done here. Raising his hand, Itadori prepared to slap Sukuna's mouth. Wait. But when that sudden request came, Yuji looked at that demonic eye with curiosity. I have a mutual proposal for the both of us. Itadori raised an eyebrow at that. At this point, what could Sukuna offer that would benefit him? He already had Sukuna's technique, along with other powerful techniques. It would only be a matter of time before he mastered them all. There was nothing about Sukuna that interested Itadori. Go on. But still, he was curious to know what the desperate king of curses had to offer. 1 minute of control, that's my only condition. Itadori frowned in irritation. What? Do you want me to give you a massage too? You think I'm an idiot? Sukuna remained silent at that last question, which Itadori noticed. You bastard. Itadori spat. I'm not done yet, that's just my condition. In exchange for 1 minute of control, I will eliminate any target you choose. And you. And I will refrain from attacking any of your friends and allies. Itadori fell silent, which made Sukuna's smile widen, believing the boy was considering the deal. But Itadori wasn't pondering the offer. In fact, he didn't need much time to realize how idiotic the deal was. Attack a target? Damn, if he were incapable of killing or even escaping from an opponent after copying so many techniques, he might as well kill himself. Sukuna must really think he was an idiot. Unlike the original Itadori, he knew what Sukuna could do with a small amount of control. A mere agreement that he wouldn't harm his allies wouldn't bring him peace of mind. Sukuna would definitely find a way to work around that rule. Considering the circumstances, Yuji didn't doubt that Sukuna would even accept penalties just to take over Megumi's body. He would be insane to accept that. I have a counter-proposal. And with a mocking smile forming on his lips, Itadori turned his attention back to that red eye. Besides not harming my friends and allies, you won't be able to move or use a single trace of cursed energy. How about that? Sukuna's smile disappeared almost immediately, his single eye narrowing. You didn't include me in the no harm rule. You really think I didn't notice? With his hand raised, Itadori gave one last venomous look at the King of Curses. Go to hell, you'll never take over my body. Slap. Hitting his palm, Itadori watched as Sukuna's eye and mouth vanished, a frustrated sigh escaping his lips. What an irritating guy. Turning when a cursed energy signature hit his senses, Itadori narrowed his eyes as he noticed a strong concentration of cursed energy not far away. A fight? He focused in an attempt to discern the signatures, quickly noticing Megumi and someone unfamiliar. He's fighting? What's going on? He didn't recall a notable fight of Megumi's except for his battle against Reggie in the culling game, so it was strange that he was involved in a confrontation so soon, especially against someone who wasn't a curse. This alerted him. It seemed his changes were affecting him sooner than he expected. Idle transfiguration. And reciting, he pulled a small object from his pocket, a shrunken curse he had captured and shaped. As the curse grew in size, he released it to reveal a creature resembling a humanoid fly. Keep an eye on the surroundings, and run to me if something powerful approaches. With the curse nodding, Itadori let the creature fly away. I'm not going to make a mistake, whoever Megumi is facing, they seem strong, Itadori noted, and taking a step forward, he prepared himself. I hope Nobara and Todo are okay. Rushing towards the battle site, Itadori noticed it wouldn't take him more than a minute to reach it. My cursed energy reinforcement seems to have improved. Smiling, he increased his speed. My type of woman? Confronted with that question, Naoya's expression suddenly lightened, his mind wandering to its dirtiest corners as he seemed to think about an answer. It wasn't a difficult question to answer. A woman with a pretty face and a sexy body who obeys me like a little dog, as she should. And with a malicious smile spreading across his lips, Naoya wiped the blood from his face with a dangerous look. Is that too much to ask? A frown formed on Todo's face as he received that answer, his smile vanishing from his lips as his expression turned grim. This seemed to confuse Naoya. Did my words offend you? You objectify women. With his cursed energy slowly increasing in his body, Todo suddenly began, which made Naoya stare at him with curiosity. There's nothing wrong with appreciating a woman's beautiful body, her beautiful breasts, her beautiful butt, her beautiful thighs, there's nothing wrong with that. Surprised when Todo's cursed energy suddenly exploded, Naoya narrowed his eyes as he took a step back. What is this brute saying? But it's necessary to respect them above all else. Takada-chan says that women deserve men's appreciation. Firmly stomping on the ground, Todo brought his palms together, a frown on his face as the cursed energy in his body circulated wildly. They are not toys to play with. Clap. Moving toward the sorcerer, Naoya narrowed his eyes as Todo was faster, his vision shifting so that he noticed he had switched positions. And widening his eyes as he noticed the cursed energy beside him, Naoya turned just in time to block a punch, gritting his teeth as he turned to face a bloodied Megumi joining his hands. New. With the Shikigami emerging from the shadows and flying toward Naoya, the Zenin narrowed his eyes as he noticed the creature approaching closer and closer. But just as the flying Shikigami seemed to hit its target with its wings, Megumi widened his eyes as he could only notice something moving toward him through his peripheral vision, a fist hitting the side of his face precisely. Damn! Megumi cursed, noticing a smiling Naoya by his side. Projection sorcery, that was Naoya's innate technique. A technique that superficially seemed simple, something that increased his speed. But in depth, the technique was much more complex. By predetermining his trajectory in a 24-frame-per-second movement, Naoya was able to move faster than most sorcerers' reaction speeds. This came with some drawbacks, such as being unable to stop when he starts moving along a predetermined trajectory, but it was nothing that a bit of preparation and strategy couldn't solve. The technique also had a stacking ability, meaning that, being hit by another punch, Megumi widened his eyes as even faster blows than the previous one struck his face. The more I activate my technique, the more my speed increases. Watching the blood fly from Megumi's wounds, Naoya's smile widened. Clap. Blinking as his position changed again, Naoya gritted his teeth in irritation, turning to see Todo running toward him. "You annoying bastard!" Naoya growled, and rushing toward Todo, he prepared to thrust into the sorcerer's stomach. But stopping his momentum, Todo brought his hands together in anticipation, his eyes following Naoya's swift movement as he waited for the right moment. And noticing Naoya exploding toward him with one last push from his legs, Todo clapped his hands even though his eyes couldn't keep up, luck showing to be on his side as he switched positions with Naoya's fist inches from his stomach. "Now!" And smiling, Todo quickly hit Naoya's back with a kick strong enough to send the Zenin flying away, a groan of pain escaping his mouth. "I'll finish this now." Concentrating cursed energy in his fist, Todo charged, but his eyes widened as Naoya suddenly disappeared from his sight. Boom! And turning around, he instinctively blocked a punch loaded with cursed energy, gritting his teeth as he was pushed back. "I need to switch." With Todo bringing his hands together to execute a position switch, Naoya was faster as a kick hit the sorcerer's fingers, a punch smashing into his abdomen right afterward and sending him flying back. "Damn it!" Todo cursed as he felt his hands tremble from the damage, a bit of blood escaping his mouth due to the hit to his stomach. At this rate, things are going to get ugly. "New!" A little distance away, Megumi quickly summoned his Shikigami, which flew toward Naoya, the Zenin's attention turning to the creature, causing a frown to appear on his face. "This is getting tiring." Avoiding the Shikigami's wings with ease, Naoya turned to Megumi. "Why don't you just die already? You piece of trash." With Naoya exploding toward him, Megumi quickly brought his hands together in time to summon a shadow that protected him from a punch that would surely have hit him squarely. But just as he was about to counterattack, he became frustrated when Naoya simply struck him with a punch to the chest that pushed him back. This is more than just speed. Gripping his chest, Megumi dived into a pool of shadows as Naoya tried to reach him, emerging not far away. "I might not be noticing something." Widening his eyes in shock as he noticed Naoya disappearing, Megumi vomited when a punch hit his stomach squarely, an excruciating pain coursing through his body that definitely shouldn't be caused by just a punch. "You know, I don't like using weapons." And raising his head to face Naoya, Megumi noticed a bloodied blade in the Zenin's hand. "But you managed to irritate me enough." Receiving a kick to the face, Megumi fell on his back to the ground, his breathing heavy as he slowly got to his knees. There, confronted by a stronger opponent, Megumi could only sigh in defeat. Once again, his lack of skill was limiting him. Once again, his lack of perspective was causing him defeat. How the hell could someone like him, who couldn't even defeat a single adversary, think of saving his own sister from something as big as the Cullen game? Shameful, Megumi just wanted to bury his head in the ground at this point. But he knew that doing so wouldn't solve anything. As depressing and useless as he was, he still had to move forward. For Tsumaki, for Itadori, and for his comrades. He needed to become stronger. He wouldn't let his own mind limit him any longer. He refused to let himself stagnate again. All his comrades had grown, and only he remained without improvement. If he were incapable of that, then it was better to die in this battle. Turning as he noticed Megumi's divine dog disappearing into shadows, Naoya stared at the boy with a curious air. To improve, to become stronger, to save those he wanted to save, Megumi needed to walk the path of the strong. Closing his eyes, Megumi let the cursed energy around his body circulate, the black shadows of his technique rotating around him to form a dark aura. He needed to be selfish. And with the dark aura spreading in all directions, Naoya took a step back cautiously, a clear change covering the boy. Megumi, who at this point had fully regulated the flow of cursed energy in his body, slowly opened his eyes. To finally reveal what he had achieved after stopping his self-limitation. What is that? Naoya seemed incredulous for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he stared intently at Megumi's face. The reason for his shock. Looking at him, there lay two yellow orbs staring deeply at him. The eyes of a wolf. No, more precisely. The eyes of a divine dog. Regardless of how many allies he had, Megumi would still die alone. That's what Gojo told him, and it was with that in mind that he developed something to help him. He couldn't just rely on his companions or even his Shikagamis to save him when facing a powerful adversary. He needed to act for himself. Weeks of practice went by, and still, he hadn't been able to progress with the technique in question. The ability to take on traits of his Shikagamis for himself. But the growth of a jujitsu sorcerer never comes easily. And confronted with a life-or-death situation, in a desperate act, he finally achieved what he wanted. It's just a cheap imitation for now. Blinking as he adjusted to his new vision, Megumi stood up. But it should be enough. Naoya, who had been watching the boy with a strange expression, let a scowl form on his face. It wasn't just Megumi's eyes. Naoya could see that something else had changed in the sorcerer. He seemed more confident, more determined. Very different from the beginning of the battle, where Naoya could see uncertainty in every move the boy made. Naoya was irritated by this. Having someone use him to improve themselves made him want to vomit. At this point, he just wanted to kill Megumi already. Disappearing in a flash step, Naoya charged toward Megumi, determined to end the sorcerer with a thrust to his heart. The game was over, these sorcerers had already irritated him enough. He wouldn't waste any more time testing them. Just as he was about to reach the boy, Naoya narrowed his eyes as he drew back his fist in anticipation. Boom! But widening his eyes as a fist struck his stomach, Naoya urgently turned to Megumi, noticing the sorcerer glaring at him with a deadly gleam in his eyes. He reacted. I can react. Megumi smiled, and pulling his fist back, he prepared to continue his attack. The divine dog's eyes let me see his movements, but... Taking a punch to the face, Megumi gritted his teeth as he quickly stepped back, swiftly joining his hands and summoning a few toads that lashed out their tongues toward the adversary, the Zenin easily dodging the attempt to restrain him. That punch was a lucky hit, my body still can't react properly. You trash. Naoya cursed, the veins on his forehead bulging as a sign of his growing anger. A cheap trick won't save you. And with those words, he exploded toward Megumi, who was preparing to sink into a pool of shadows. Clap. But freezing when the vision before him changed, Naoya went on alert and turned as he raised his defense, his attempt ineffective as a fist struck him square in the face, pushing him back. Don't forget about me, Aoi Todo. Todo exclaimed, a bit of blood staining his teeth. You son of a bitch. Naoya spat blood, an irritated smile forming. I'm going to kill you all. Rushing toward the sorcerer, Naoya widened his eyes as numerous tongues restrained his movements, Todo propelling himself forward and taking the opportunity to land a solid punch to his stomach. Ugh! Naoya spat, and adjusting his trajectory to move away, he let his technique guide him. But when he was at frame 2024, his eyes widened as his body was abruptly struck, terror spreading across his face as he felt his muscles freeze due to the penalty for not respecting the 24-frame movement. 24 frames per second. Hearing that statement, Naoya noticed Megumi glaring at him with a venomous smile. I could see it just now. Son of a bitch dash. Boom. Taking a punch charged with cursed energy to the chest, Naoya flew backward, blood escaping from his mouth, the vein on his forehead becoming more prominent as he stopped his momentum with his feet. You bastards! Naoya vomited a mouthful of blood, the damage to his body proving more than he could bear. Do you think this is over? No one's going to accept a piece of shit like you as the clan leader. Pointing at Megumi with a trembling hand, Naoya screamed with hatred embedded in every word. Mark my words, boy. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to dash. But as he seemed determined to continue his villainous declaration, his eyes widened when he felt something pierce his thigh, his eyes moving downward to see a nail embedded in his flesh. Hey! And in the distance, a bloodied Nobara flashed a malicious smile as the hammer in her hands glowed with cursed energy. Why don't you repeat what you said, you piece of shit? Speaking with disdain, Nobara surprised everyone as numerous nails began floating around her, the woman's smile widening. Men like you deserve to be put down like a dog. Naoya gritted his teeth as the nails exploded in his direction, his eyes narrowing before he used his technique to avoid the attacks, moving away. Megumi tried to follow him, but the adrenaline wasn't enough to keep him on his feet much longer, the blood loss from the wound in his stomach causing him to collapse to his knees. Damn it! Don't run, you bastard! Nobara roared as she realized Naoya had disappeared, the frustration evident on her face. You coward! Are you okay? Todo approached Megumi. Even though he was the first to be struck by Naoya, his resilience left him in a better state than the other two. We need to get back to the school, Megumi said, as Todo helped him to his feet. Nobara huffed when she noticed that the Zenin wouldn't return, and rubbing her abdomen with a dejected expression, she turned to the two. Damn, I need a massage. This isn't the time for that, Megumi complained, but Nobara just shrugged. A little farther away, Naoya could be seen running from the battlefield, a murderous gleam in his eyes as he appeared quite indifferent. Defeated by Megumi and Todo, he couldn't help but feel frustrated and humiliated. None of them should have been difficult to deal with. But his arrogance ended up affecting him. Because of that, he was unable to kill them. He wouldn't make that mistake again. The next time he encountered Megumi Fushiguro, he would shatter his heart with a single strike, whether he was clan leader or not. That was a promise. From the top of a building, Itadori watched Naoya leave in silence, his eyebrows raising as he noticed a scowl forming on the Zenin's face before he increased his speed. That was interesting. He decided to let Naoya go. The Zenin had a purpose, and that was something he didn't want to change. Having him serve as a way for Maki to evolve was crucial for her strengthening. He didn't want to take that from her. Turning to see his companions preparing to leave, a sincere smile spread across his lips. It seems like things are changing too much. That's good. Nodding in satisfaction, he stood on the edge of the building, his eyes wandering over the view of the city that had once been so bustling. The preparations are complete. One again. With a smile, Gojo declared right after knocking Megumi down with a kick, the young sorcerer sitting on the ground as sweat dripped down his face. Was that the 21st attempt? Man, I'm getting bored, Gojo said with a sigh, his eyes landing on a tired Megumi. Anyway, let's continue the lesson. After catching his breath, Megumi nodded before standing up. Even though Gojo was an idiot most of the time, there was no denying his skill. Both in jujitsu knowledge and combat abilities, the teacher was on a different level. With or without infinity, Megumi couldn't even touch him. You wanted to know about binding vows, right? Megumi's eyes lit up with interest as Gojo asked, and he nodded almost immediately. Binding vows, something Megumi had recently developed an interest in. Are you feeling so pressured by Yuji's growth that you want to use them? Gojo stared at the boy for a few seconds before shrugging. Well, I don't care. If you really want to learn how to use them, I'll teach you. Megumi cracked a small smile and stood in front of the teacher. As you know, binding vows are contracts made with other people or with yourself. Basically, you can choose to harm or limit yourself in exchange for greater power. Moreover, they can be used to improve the efficiency of a technique and even help create a move impossible without a vow. Megumi nodded, listening attentively. It's not difficult to use. For vows with yourself, you just need to declare your intention, what you will offer, and what you want in return. If it's an equivalent exchange, the jujitsu will do the rest. Megumi remained silent. In the back of his mind, an idea was forming, one that he would soon put to use. What will you do with that? Gojo, noticing Megumi's pensive expression, asked with interest. You'll see soon enough, Megumi shrugged. Oh. But receiving that cold response, Gojo appeared in front of Megumi in the blink of an eye, a proud smile on his lips. So mysterious. They grow up so fast. Shut up. A vein popped on the young sorcerer's forehead. Gojo laughed but stopped when something seemed to dawn on him, turning to Megumi with a friendly smile. A friendly smile that Megumi immediately recognized as fake. Hey, Megumi. I was wondering, what did you think of that book I recommended to you? Megumi's eyes turned cold at that question, Gojo blinking in confusion as he noticed. You bastard. When the young sorcerer clasped his hands, and his cursed energy exploded uncontrollably in all directions, Gojo watched with urgency. About to step back, Gojo's eyes widened when a huge elephant emerged from the shadows behind Megumi, the teacher realizing the danger immediately. Hey, Megumi. Calm down. Water jet. But before Gojo could calm Megumi down, the elephant blew a massive jet of water that shot towards the man at full speed. I guess he found out. Ugh. He's waking up. Quick, hide the pen. Blinking slowly, Megumi sat up while rubbing his eyes, a yawn escaping his lips as his vision adjusted to the light. What happened? And asking as his vision finally adjusted to see a white room, he turned to see Nobara and Itadori standing far from his bed in a suspicious manner. What is it? Nobara's lips trembled while Itadori maintained a far too serious expression for the situation. It didn't take Megumi long to realize something was really wrong. What are you idiots looking at? Megumi frowned, which made Nobara cover her mouth in an attempt to stifle her laughter, Itadori's lips trembling despite his serious demeanor. Nothing, Itadori tried to say, but his faltering tone betrayed him. Megumi got up and moved to the bathroom, stopping in front of the mirror. Only to see numerous drawings scribbled all over his face, from paintings that made him look funny to indecent drawings like hairy balls. Nobara and Itadori burst into laughter as Megumi just stared at the mirror silently. Blinking slowly, Megumi turned on the faucet and cupped water in his hands, trying to wash his face. But with each scrub, when there was no sign of the drawings disappearing, Megumi slowly turned to stare at the two companions. And looking confused, Nobara pulled out the pen they had used to mark his face. Oh. Reading the pen brand name, a surprised sound escaped her lips, Itadori widening his eyes in recognition as he approached to understand the reason for her surprise. Oh. He echoed her reaction. It's permanent. Megumi stared at them with a blank expression, a sigh escaping his lips as he began to move his hands closer. Seeing this, the two exchanged glances for a moment. I think we better run. Outside the infirmary, Yuta and Inumaki were walking together towards the cafeteria. Even though the jujitsu higher-ups were dead, Yaga was still alive and walking. With the school under his jurisdiction, he wouldn't let his students go hungry. He would even cook if necessary. Even though his cooking wasn't the best. I wonder what Principal Yaga made today. Yuta shivered as he remembered the principal's attempt at making spaghetti. Takana. Inumaki spoke in a worried tone. Well, it can't be that bad. I hope. As the two walked, Yuta went on alert when he felt the ground shake, Inumaki beside him taking a stance. What was that? As the two searched for the source of the tremor, they quickly turned to the infirmary building as the tremor intensified. Boom! Only to see the window shatter with a jet of water, a soaked Itadori landing firmly on the ground with an equally soaked Nobara on his shoulder. That was close, Itadori sighed as he set the girl down, Nobara grabbing his shoulder and breathing heavily. I thought I was going to drown. Damn, you should have noticed it was a permanent marker. Hey, you agreed. Don't blame me. And as the two stared at each other seriously, a smile spread across Itadori's lips. But it was funny. That brought a laugh out of Nobara, with her quickly dropping her previous seriousness. Definitely. As the two started laughing, Yuta and Inumaki watched them in silence. What happened? It had been a long time since Itadori had taken some time for himself. The training had taken the best out of him. But alone in his dorm, he could finally take a moment to think about himself. His arrival in this world, the death of his two brothers, his inability to stop Kenjaku. It was a bit too much to bear. He could feel his Itadori side overwhelmed, but Mark was still standing strong. All of this had left him apprehensive, and with the elders' deaths, he needed to keep his head straight more than ever. Luckily, he could manage that. Sigh. Moving to the bathroom, he stopped in front of the mirror, his eyes wandering over his face. He had changed since his arrival. Thanks to Jogo's accurate fire attack, his hair had been slightly burned. This led to a healing process through miracles, which considerably altered his strands. The black strands that parted his hair into a fade were gone, replaced by pink ones. Noticing this made him realize the resemblance he had to Sukuna's true form. Strange. Besides that, he could also notice subtle changes in his eyes, a faint golden hue mixing with his light brown irises. Maybe these changes had to do with his technique, but truth be told, he didn't know. He didn't remember Itadori changing like this. It was most likely due to the soul fusion between the two. Thanks to Mahito's technique, he could perceive his own soul in much more depth. Compared to others, his soul was larger, more robust. A concrete sign that Mark and Itadori's souls had become one. Initially, Mark felt bad for having stolen Itadori's body, but seeing how that wasn't the case, he felt relieved. His mind might be more dominated by Mark's side, but that was probably because he had lived longer as Mark. Unlike Maki and Mai, where their souls were merely intertwined, Mark and Yuji's souls had fused completely in an irreversible process. They were one being. Staring at his reflection for a few more seconds, Itadori washed his face with some water and moved to his bed, sitting on the edge. One being. Itadori hadn't stopped to think about it, but now he couldn't help but feel curious. Who was responsible for this? He doubted it was Kenjaku. To be able to bring a soul from a different universe, whoever it was must be more powerful than anything in this world. Perhaps it could be Jujutsu itself, but Itadori doubted that. It seemed too far out of this universe's boundaries. An anomaly? A god? Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Itadori just shrugged. Maybe he shouldn't think about it. Whatever that light in space was, it was better for him to stay in the dark about it. If he angered whatever it was with his curiosity, there wouldn't be anything he could do. He was handling everything well, there was no point in shifting his focus. He also didn't want to confront the wrath of a super powerful god. Yuji. You in there? Blinking as knock sounded at the door, Itadori got up and walked to open it, seeing Choso waiting for him. Yuki Tsukumo is gathering the sorcerers, we should go. Itadori nodded, and grabbing his jacket from the bed, he quickly put it on before heading out with Choso in tow. You feeling okay? Choso asked, walking by his side. Yes, my injuries are completely healed. Itadori nodded, quickly moving his shoulder to prove his point. By the way, I noticed something. Raising his eyebrow suggestively, Itadori gave Choso a confused look. You seem to have memorized Miss Tsukumo's name, and not just her name, but also her surname. A smile spread across Itadori's lips as he nudged Choso's shoulder. Is something going on between you two? You've been pretty close lately. A faint crimson hue spread across Choso's cheeks, the death painting crossing his arms as he shrugged. I don't know what you're talking about, Yuji. Sure. Itadori shrugged, his face making it clear he wasn't convinced. And you, Yuji? Confused when Choso suddenly asked, Itadori turned to him. What about me? You and that black-haired girl have been pretty close lately. A small smile spread across Choso's lips, making Itadori's eyes widen. Should I be expecting some nieces and nephews? In disbelief, Itadori blinked a few times while staring at him, a crimson hue taking over his cheeks before he coughed awkwardly and looked away. I didn't know you had that in you. Choso smiled proudly. I'm your older brother, it's my job to embarrass you when necessary. Itadori nodded, giving Choso the victory, and just continued walking with his brother by his side. It didn't take long for them to see everyone gathered at the main door that led to Master Tengen's resting place. Glad you made it. Yuki smiled when she saw them. Now we can continue. Wait, but how are we supposed to find the exact door that leads to the tomb? Megumi asked. And Choso, to answer him, stepped forward. Between the doors and the tomb is a cursed warehouse where the remains of my younger brothers are being kept. Even though they are just remains, with all 6 together, I can sense them thanks to a secondary effect of my technique. Itadori should be able to as well, by now. Itadori blinked at this information, and turning to the door, he focused for a moment only to notice how his blood seemed to try to guide him in a certain direction. Oh, that's true. Good, but I've been wondering this for a while. Maki, who had been silently listening, suddenly began. Who is this guy? That didn't seem to be a question just from Maki, as other sorcerers there also seemed to want to know. And seeing this, Itadori placed a hand on Choso's shoulder, a smile on his lips. He's my older brother, so treat him with respect, alright? Choso's eyes widened, happiness filling his chest. Yuji. Itadori laughed at that, patting his brother's back, and then turned to the group. Well, let's move on. Standing in front of that warehouse with Choso by his side, Itadori pressed his lips together as the sensation in his blood grew stronger. Behind this door, his brothers were confined. They didn't share a blood connection, but his technique, which had awakened after devouring his other 2 brothers, connected them. He could feel his blood guiding him to find them. A feeling of brotherhood, a sensation Itadori had felt before. The feeling of holding his newborn younger brother for the first time. That urge to protect him, the bond that a brother has for another. Itadori felt this, and he could also sense that. His brothers were feeling the same. Placing his palm on the warehouse gate, Itadori remained silent, while Choso observed him with a small smile. Hey, Choso. Itadori called out, and turning to his older brother, he smiled. Let's free them together. Choso paused, his eyes filling with tears as he nodded. Yes, Yuji. As the group continued, it didn't take long before they reached the elevator that led to Tengen's main temple. While curious glances wandered around the place, Itadori broke the silence as he noticed the absence of some familiar faces. Where are Todo and Director Yaga? He asked. Todo is guarding the entrance. With the death of the elders, we can't slack on security. The director is figuring out how many managers we still have available, Yuki explained, and Itadori nodded. As the elevator finally reached the tomb of the star plasma vessel, Itadori glanced around curiously, his gaze landing on the bloodstains on the ground. Seems like this is where things started to fall apart. He remembered Amanai's death, the moment when things began to fall into place for Kenjaku. The atmosphere felt heavy, something strange that Itadori couldn't help but notice. This place is filled with cursed energy. It's almost overwhelming. He noted how the area was saturated with cursed energy. Most likely, Tengen had full control over the entire tomb. Let's go, the main temple is this way, Yuki called for their attention. As the group continued, Itadori stopped when he felt something odd, his eyes narrowing as he turned around alertly. But there was nothing suspicious. He turned, intending to warn his companions. Huh? But when he saw nothing but a completely white, empty room, confusion filled his features. What is this? It's a pleasure to meet you. Widening his eyes when a voice sounded behind him, Itadori quickly turned, raising his hand in anticipation. Sukuna vessel. To his surprise, the one who had startled him was none other than the Talking Thumb, the near god of the Jujutsu world, Master Tengen. A figure Itadori had expected to meet, but not under these circumstances. Hello. Master Tengen, I presume. Still wary, Itadori scanned the surroundings, looking for his companions. Where are the others? You don't need to worry about them. Arms crossed, Tengen declared with a calm smile. I only needed to speak with you alone, so I separated you from the rest. What's this about? Itadori narrowed his eyes. Tengen wanting to speak with him personally was far from expected. Well, basically, I could see. Taking a step forward, Tengen frowned seriously, causing Itadori to eye him cautiously. The shape of your soul. Itadori blinked, surprised that Tengen could see his soul. It wasn't a common ability, at least according to Mahito. But considering Tengen was around 1,000 years old, it was expected. He, or she, should know all kinds of techniques. And what about it? Well, since you took the curse technique from Mahito for yourself, you must have noticed how different your soul seems compared to others, Tengen said, and Itadori raised an eyebrow at that. It intrigues me. It's the first time I've seen something like this in my more than 1,000 years of existence. Oh. That's something. Itadori rubbed the back of his neck. Thanks. If Tengen wasn't suspicious of him having two souls fused together, then there was no point in revealing anything. Tengen smiled at the boy's confusion. Your technique is also quite intriguing. A technique with such potential, I can sense that the very Jujutsu world has been affected by its awakening. Itadori frowned. That seemed like interesting information. Just as Gojo Satoru shifted the balance of the world upon his birth, the balance has been altered once again with the awakening of your technique. I can feel the curses growing stronger by the second. Yuji stared at Tengen for a few moments before nodding in understanding. He hadn't expected his presence to affect the world, but it seemed that his technique was powerful enough that the Jujutsu system believed the scales were tipping too far toward the sorcerers. He could expect even more powerful curses in the coming years. But for now, that wasn't something to worry about. And what do you want with me, sir, ma'am? I left my gender behind as I continued to evolve, but technically, I would be a ma'am. Itadori nodded. Alright. What do you want with me, ma'am? Well, I have a request for you, Yuji Itadori. With a serious tone, Tengen looked at Itadori. Kenjaku, whom you know as the fake Geto, seeks to force humanity's evolution by assimilating me with everyone in Japan. That's problematic, Itadori said, as if he didn't already know that. Certainly, which is why I must make a request of you. As Tengen frowned, Itadori felt the tension in her gaze. If the time comes, and there is no other option, then I ask, Yuji Itadori. Devour me. Itadori blinked, processing that request. If Kenjaku succeeds in his plan, not only will thousands of civilians die, but evil will spread instantly, and a depravity equivalent to 100 million people will fall upon the world. You must know the result of that. The end of the world. Itadori sighed, and turning to Tengen, he had a question about such a request. Tengen was the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world, responsible for suppressing cursed spirits in Japan with her barriers spread throughout the country. What would happen if Itadori devoured her? Would he be responsible for keeping those barriers in place? He needed to know. As much as he wanted to change the Jujutsu world, the last thing he wanted was to follow rules like, don't interfere, just because he became some kind of Buddha by devouring Tengen. Master Tengen, you are crucial to the Jujutsu world, I don't think I should devour you. Even if Kenjaku is about to capture you. Tengen nodded. I can sense your concerns, but there is no need for that. This is only if it becomes absolutely necessary. Besides, I can't ask this of anyone else, your soul is strong, and I can tell you would be able to assimilate me without any problems. You wouldn't master my techniques initially, but you would soon get the hang of it. Furthermore, Kenjaku would only be able to initiate the assimilation if he forced you. Currently, my main body is more cursed than human, making me susceptible to curse manipulation. Itadori understood. The situation was delicate. If Kenjaku managed to capture Tengen, recovering her would be extremely difficult. It also wasn't far-fetched that Kenjaku had countermeasures even if Gojo were freed. Perhaps devouring Tengen was the salvation from a darker future. I understand. And with a sigh, he accepted. In the end, another technique was another weapon in his arsenal. If necessary, I'll do it. Tengen nodded, and after pausing for a moment, she looked into the air for a moment. It seems I've finished the conversation with the others. This confused Itadori. Can you create clones? Technically, it's not a clone, as it's just a manifestation of my mind, since I have now become part of the earth and sky. Oh, that's cool. Itadori gave a thumbs up, even though he didn't fully understand. This drew a laugh from Tengen. Well, I'll take you back to your companions. By now, they should all be aware of Kenjaku's plans. Should I reveal the content of our conversation? Tengen was silent for a moment before responding. Keep it a secret for now. Itadori nodded. It seemed that things had changed too much.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.